So I'm going to call our meeting to order tonight at 5:30. In attendance, we are all attending via Teams. We do have regrets from Trustee Hatfield this evening. Actually, we do have Trustee Olmsted. Is she? Yes, I see her. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm looking for a mover to approve this public meeting agenda tonight. I see Trustee Sartori. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you, Trustee Cook. So that's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the public agenda this evening? Seeing nothing in the chat and hearing nothing, all in favor of approval of the agenda tonight? Anyone opposed? Wonderful. Looking for some mover to convene into private session. Trustee Leclerc, seconded by Trustee Sartori. All in favor? Anyone opposed? I will see everyone over in private session. We'll see you all back here at 7 o'clock.
Our last education meeting of 2021 to order. And I will begin with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenni Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, Ojibwe, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Huron-Wendat peoples. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. For attendance today, we do have regrets from Trustee Hatfield. All other trustees and student trustees are in attendance via Teams. First item today is the approval of our agenda. Do I have someone to move that? Trustee Sipkar, do I have anyone to second it? Trustee Sartori, is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none. Do I have the support? Is there anyone who opposes the agenda? Trustee Burgess?
No, that was a hand in support, ma'am.
Oh, thank you so much, Trustee Burgess, for clarifying. Is there anyone who opposes? Seeing and hearing none, that carries. Declaration of conflict of interest for this Education Committee meeting. Seeing no hands, nothing in the chat. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes from the Education Committee meeting from October the 5th of 2021, moved by Trustee Hickison, seconded by Trustee Sipkar. Is there any discussions revolving around those minutes? All right, seeing none. In support of the minutes? Thank you. Is there anyone who opposes them? Right, hearing none, that carries. Was there any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, we can move on to presentations. The first presentation is the Science of Reading Initiatives by Dr. Howitt and Superintendent Wilcox.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here to present on something we're very excited and passionate about, which is building educator capacity to teach reading by providing professional development and resources aligned with the science of reading research. This focus is a partnership between the program department and the special education department. And so Superintendent Howitt and I are pleased to be here to provide you with this update on the important work that's being done around reading. And just on a personal note, coming together as two departments, and I think that Dr. Howitt will agree, there's been a lot of great professional learning going on, even amongst our committee. We have psych services staff, we have speech and language pathologists, We have program consultants and special education consultants. So it's been really great learning from each other on this journey, and we hope to continue. Next slide, please. So our committee started early last year, probably around February or March. We started by creating a vision to guide our learning journey. And so our vision is up there. It's to provide an equitable, inclusive, responsive, and comprehensive literacy program based on the science of reading that utilizes assessments and instructional practices to ensure every student has the fundamental right to learn to read. We believe in a future where our collective focus on applying the science of reading through teacher and leader preparation and classroom application will elevate and transform through the power of literacy. Our goal is to see more systematic, more sequential, more explicit instruction occurring consistently throughout all of our classrooms to support students. As many of you may be aware, on October 3rd, 2019, the Ontario Human Rights Commission announced a public inquiry to find out if students with reading disabilities have meaningful access to education as required by the Ontario Human Rights Code. The Ontario Human Rights Commission selected 8 school boards to assess their obligation to provide equal treatment to students with reading disabilities. And this report is scheduled for release in February 2022. We know that the comprehensive final report will include detailed findings and recommendations for government, for school boards, for faculties of education, and others on curriculum and instruction, early screening, reading interventions, accommodation, professional assessments, and systemic issues. We will be reviewing the report on its release to determine next steps for our board. But I would like to take this time just to mention that we feel like we're in really good stead. We have done a lot of work. For some of you who may have been around 7 years ago, we did some great work through the Ministry of Education. We were one of the 10 pilot boards for the Ministry of Reading pilot. And so we used the funding provided to support Lexia licenses in our schools. So we have that as a tier 2 intervention for our struggling readers. And we also use some of the budget, and we continue to budget annually to have Empower in every one of our elementary schools. And this, of course, Empower is for students who have severe reading disabilities, including dyslexia. So we're very proud to offer those in all of our elementary schools. And both of those resources are very closely aligned with the science of reading.
Next slide, please. Good evening, everyone. Due to advancements in cognitive science, we know more about how kids learn to read than we ever have before. The science of reading dispels misconceptions and myths about reading instruction. And we have to remember that teaching is a regulatory body. Teaching is more than just a job, it's a profession, whereby the science and art of teaching is constantly evolving, constantly innovating. What I did in my classroom almost 30 years ago, there are some things that I would continue to do the same, and there would be things that I would be doing differently because I would know more. So keeping that in mind, it's our responsibility to use the science of reading to inform policy and practice that fosters classroom practices that align with the science of reading and prepare students to not just be good readers, but great readers, which is their fundamental right. The science of reading is a vast interdisciplinary body of scientifically based research about reading issues related to both reading and writing. The research has been conducted over 50 years, and it's derived from thousands of studies conducted in multiple languages all around the world. So there is a preponderance of evidence to inform how proficient reading and writing develop, and how it can improve outcomes through prevention and intervention in reading difficulties. And like Superintendent Wilcox noted, we've been able to do some great learning along the way, and it's been fantastic to learn in the combined efforts of both departments. And I really want to acknowledge the work of Dr. Mark Crunwell and his leadership and helping us to understand more of the neuroscience of research and what is developed over the recent years. And there's two things that significantly stuck with me. And one of the things that I've learned is that things that happen because of our brain, there are things that are hardwired in our brain, and reading is not one of them. An example of something that's hardwired in our brains as humans is I give you the example of a child. If you take a child and you lay them on the floor on a blanket, over time, developmentally, that child will eventually roll over. That child will eventually crawl on the developmental continuum. That child will eventually walk. And also that child will eventually run based on that developmental continuum. I think about it with my children. I didn't teach them to walk. It happened. I might have held their hand as they were taking their first steps, but it's hardwired in them as human beings. For reading, it's not. And so we need to borrow from different parts of our brain to support that. A second item that really resonated with me is when you look at the research, that it indicates that 30% of students, regardless of the learning environment that they're in, will learn to read. But 70% need not just some, but a lot of support to help them become good readers. And that really struck me. Knowing that and understanding more about the science of reading has really underscored the work that we're doing. Next slide, please. So the science of reading is not like a fad or a philosophy. It's not a political agenda. It's not a pre-bought program that we buy and provide to all our teachers. It's connected to those 5 components noted on the screen: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and language comprehension. And here's how I kind of always remember it in my mind. Phonemic awareness is recognizing the structures of the spoken word, the sounds. Phonics is the introduction of decoding those letters. It's the auditory overlaying on the orthographic. So it's the sound to the letters. That leads to fluency, which is really the ability to have speed, accuracy, expression with reading, happening simultaneously, building more vocabulary and overall language comprehension. So if you go to the next slide, what this slide demonstrates is that it's kind of a scaffolded process while also happening simultaneously with phonemic awareness, meaning those sounds being taught are foundational to that work happening, followed by the phonics, the letters, followed by the fluency, and all building vocabulary and language comprehension simultaneously. I'm going to pass it back to Mike. I think you're muted, Mike.
Thank you. So this is a quote from Dr. Louisa Moats, who's a researcher who's done tremendous research in the area of science of reading. And she states, just about all children can be taught to read and deserve no less from their teachers. Teachers, in turn, deserve no less than the knowledge, skills, and supportive practices that will enable their teaching to succeed. There's no more important challenge for education to undertake. Dr. Moats acknowledged that the most fundamental responsibility of schools is teaching students to read, because reading affects all academic achievement and is associated with social, emotional, economic, and physical health. She also acknowledges that most reading failure is unnecessary, and research demonstrates that classroom teaching itself, when it includes a range of research-based components and practice, can prevent and mitigate reading difficulties. And this is where our focus is in the Greater Essex County District School Board moving ahead. Next slide, please. How do we bring about change to improve the outcomes of students? Louisa Moats has indicated that we must think of preparing our schools and teachers with the knowledge that comes from the science of reading, as it is a matter of equity. Well-trained teachers with the knowledge and skills from the science of reading will be far better positioned to ensure we teach all children to read. To reach this goal, we have to remember that most teachers did not have the opportunity or privilege to learn about the science of reading in their teacher preparation and how to teach foundational reading skills explicitly in a structured approach following the sequence of reading development. We must move forward now with the journey of providing teachers the skills and resources to teach reading. Next slide, please.
So we're really excited with our professional development plan. In September, all kindergarten educators had the opportunity to engage in a 1-hour learning session introducing them to the science of reading. And in early October, we launched our initial session to continue in November and December and January for every primary homeroom teacher and learning support teacher to engage in almost 12 hours of professional learning around the science of reading. And that was delivered in collaboration or the collaborative efforts between program and special education. In January, we're hoping to begin professional development again with kindergarten teachers, our RISE teachers, and our ESL teachers, and again, learning support teachers. That would equate about 6 hours of professional development. Next slide, please. So what will they be learning during these many hours of professional development? There will be a definition of what the science of reading is. So they'll get a broad, comprehensive understanding of what it is. It'll build teacher content knowledge in the areas of phonological awareness, decoding, encoding, and sight recognition, language comprehension, and vocabulary. And one of the things that we're very fortunate in our district is we're a very resource-rich board. So we want to highlight all of the amazing resources that we have, what they do, how they can help and support the science of reading, and really highlight it for everybody so that it builds that awareness so teachers know where to go to have the tools to do the very important work that they do in schools. I'd like to underscore that the big focus of the learning will be around structured literacy, and structured literacy emphasizes the highly explicit, sequential, and systematic teaching of all important components of literacy. So like I mentioned earlier, when I was a teacher in a classroom, I was excited to teach reading. I don't think, actually, I know I didn't do it in a systematic, sequential, explicit teaching way. And that's the piece that we're wanting to underscore with all of our primary educators to support students in having the fundamental right to be great readers. Next slide. Mike, if you can unmute again.
Thank goodness we're co-presenting, Superintendent Howitt. So as we all know, to get people to do the work, we need to provide them with the tools. We recognize the importance of providing educators with the resources they need to support student learning, and have invested in resources to support them in implementing the science of reading. These include the ongoing sharing and development of our Growing Literacy in Early Years document for kindergarten to grade 3 to support assessment, implementation, and intervention based on current research. And this is a living document that we're adding to on a regular basis based on collaboration between program and special education departments and educator input and feedback during the PD sessions. We were also very lucky to be able to provide classroom literacy kits for all kindergarten to grade 3 classrooms that include items that can be used for intentional small group instruction that include magnetic letters, magnetic wands, letter sets and chips, and dry erase boards, along with additional resources. And it actually was great because we piloted some of these resources in our summer learning camps, and we're able to see them being used. So we know that they're tremendous resources for the teachers to use in their classroom. And so we'll be sending resources to all schools for the book rooms, including kits to support small group instruction and decodable text for English and French immersion programs as well. Next slide, please. And part of last spring, when we were in our initial planning stages, the committee, or members of our committee, did an intensive review of our current literacy resources available in Greater Essex County District School Board. And as Superintendent Howitt said, we really are a resource-rich board. But we want to ensure that resources we use as a board aligned with the science of reading. So in spring of 2021, a comprehensive reference document was created for administrators and educators to highlight all resources in Greater Essex that support literacy. And the table of content organizes the resources by purpose. So whether it's a diagnostic assessment, whole group instruction, small group instruction, and it identifies the target audience by grade level and areas of focus, so phonics, vocabulary, or fluency. And we want to make these resources accessible and as organized as possible so that we know that our educators in our classrooms are using them. Next slide, please. And so inside this document that we've created, administrators and educators can view an image of each resource, where it might be located within the building, and a brief description. So as you can see up here, we have the oral language at your fingertips document with a description of what that's used for. And we have the Ontario Writing Assessment, which I know many of you have seen, we call OWA. And so again, this is what educators see when they open up our document to see the resources available. The purpose of the document is to create a common awareness and to support literacy instruction and make accessing the resources more user-friendly.
So we are working with 5 specific schools to conduct the screener assessments with all JK or all kindergarten and primary students, 5 specific schools. And what our goal is to have over 70% of the students demonstrate a 10% increase from their first to second assessment, or from their first to their last assessment. So we'll be collecting screening data for all of those students in the fall, winter, and spring. And we'll collect additional pre and post data at all of our coaching schools. And so the screening tools that we're using is the SK screener, a set called Sound Foundation, and it looks to measure phonological awareness. And then for grade 1 to 3, we're using the Quick Phonics screener, which looks specifically at phonics and decoding skills. Next slide, please. Both Mike and I would like to extend a very sincere thank you to the dedicated core team of professionals who've been planning and developing the resources and executing the professional development. And that team includes Dr. Mark Crundwell, teacher consultants Yvette Lehman and Angeline Humber, speech pathologist Melinda Hinch, and educational coordinator Tammy Wilcox. At this time, both Superintendent Wilcox and myself are very pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Are there any questions? Trustee Halberstadt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I was interested in one, I don't think you mentioned it, Superintendent, but in there it says that the current curriculum is not really, let me read it, is not providing what the science shows, I think was the verbiage there. So we're still on whole language, is that not true? We're in that platform, but we're going.
I believe we are supporting the science of reading. Are you referring specifically to the curriculum?
Yeah.
The curriculum provides overall and specific expectations. And I think what we're trying to talk about is the pedagogy of it. It's not the content, it's the pedagogy, how we do it. And so that's the structured literacy and the science of reading.
Okay, but that gets to the kids, right? I mean, isn't that the idea?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Your science of reading is getting down to the children. That's how we're.
Yeah. Yes, the pedagogy is how the teachers are teaching the content. And so absolutely, it connects directly to what's happening at the desk of every student.
Okay, and are we ahead of everybody else with regard to the science of reading, or we're a front runner, I guess? Don't want to put down other systems, but would you say that's a fair statement?
I'm looking to Superintendent Wilcox. Would you like to answer that one?
Sure. So although we've not used the word science of reading, our board has followed many aspects of the science of reading research in the past. So we had a huge initiative a few years back called Reaching Every Learner, where we assisted teachers to understand how reading develops and what components of reading need to be taught in the classroom. We talked about early assessment tools to identify students who are at risk for reading difficulties. And we talked about identifying students at risk to then assist teachers with how to provide early intervention. So this isn't something that is new. It's an ongoing body of research that we've drawn from, but really a large focus. And as Superintendent Howard said, the data shows that there are so many students out there who are struggling learners. And at a time when we're trying to address gaps that have occurred due to COVID, et cetera, this is great work that we're doing to build teacher capacity. Are we ahead of other boards? I know that there are some boards in Ontario who have not yet started this journey. and that has been the focus of some of our ministry meetings. So I don't want to say, I would love to be able to say we're leading the province, but I think we're doing a good job, and we're providing the support to our educators that they need to support our students. I don't know if I answered that, but I hope I did.
Yes, thank you. I noticed too that you're quite aggressive with the goals as far as the improvement in reading, 5%, I think. That's something I haven't seen that figure, that percentage in the past. So would that be a fair statement that our goals are very high with regard to the learning?
I would say that our goal is aggressive, but with the plan, as Superintendent Wilcox stated, I think we're really well positioned to do this work, prepared to do this work. I think our educators, particularly after a year of the pandemic, are very concerned about the reading levels of their students. So I think we're really well positioned with a great professional development program, amazing resources for our educators, and educators who are keenly positioned to want to do the very best for their students and help them to learn to read. So I think it's an aggressive goal, but I think a reachable goal, and probably one of the most important goals that we're dealing with right now in education.
Thank you. Good news.
Trustee Higginson.
Thank you very much through you, Madam Chair. That actually segues very nicely into the question that I had, and I did have a question about the aggressive goal that we have. So I'm glad that that was answered, and I was very intrigued by that number of 70% of students require that little extra incentive, and knowing how many of those students are coming into our board as new learners or in their early years programs, and how influential those group of leaders are who are engaging in this, and how that will not only in the 5% that we'll see realized hopefully with this program, but how that will lead forward to into their other grades beyond early years. I think it's really transformational, and I'm really proud of this work that we're doing. I'm wondering what feedback we have gotten and how we gather staff feedback on implementing this, what we're seeing with, I heard a lot of talk about the gaps that we knew were coming in but are now realized post-COVID or during, I guess we're still in COVID, with our students coming back. What's the feedback from staff been about this this training that they're getting and implementing it, and how they're experiencing that in their classroom environments?
I can start that one off. First of all, I think one of the biggest concerns that have come forward from teachers, as I just mentioned, and also shared by our union partners, are teachers are very concerned about the reading levels of students coming out of the pandemic. So we know it's a priority for our educators. We know it's a priority for our administrators. That's feedback that's coming to us regularly due to the pandemic situation and the residual impact of the pandemic. Secondly, in our sessions, teachers are giving us the first round, and it's not fully complete yet, the first round. We've been getting some very positive feedback. We also ran sessions in the summer voluntarily for teachers, and over 100 teachers, educators attended with extremely positive feedback, like just soaking it up because it's such valuable, pragmatic, helpful information. Knowledge and skills and resources to help them do the work. In fact, it was the teachers that told us, please, can we have the decodable books? So what did we do? Mike and I worked together, and we ensured that decodable books are going out to schools. They're telling us what they need. We'll also be conducting focus groups with our educators to get more feedback specifically as the PD continues to roll out. I think it's very important for us to constantly be capturing the pulse of what's happening with educators in classrooms who are boots on the ground doing the work and seeing the results right in the classroom. So that's been part of our commitment so far, and we are consistently opening to hearing what our educators have to say, because it's our job to be responsive to their needs and doing that very important work.
Thank you for that. I'm glad to hear that we're consistently looking at them. I think about BEd students at the University of Windsor and getting this information as they kind of lead in, and that energy that kind of leads into those classrooms is really led by their colleagues that are teaching in classrooms right now who have been through quite an ordeal over these last 2 years. And I'm glad that we're doing something like this that's giving them training and giving them an addition to their professional practice. I think it's great. I'm really excited about this work.
Trustee Burgess, I have you next on the list for a question.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I know you're very excited about this, Madam Chair, and I know I am very excited. It's just terrific work, and it's rebranded and new information, the science of reading, but we have been doing a lot of this stuff for a long time, so it's nice to see it, in this concerted way. My question segues really well with previous speakers. A very important partner in helping children to learn to read are, of course, their parents and guardians. And while we frame things saying during the pandemic, really, I think the I'm going to say the deprivation, to our souls and bodies and minds happened during lockdown. So it's not necessarily just the pandemic in broad strokes. It's the 18 weeks plus, that we were in lockdown during the last school year, and then of course in 2020, from March till June, and the missing part there was not only the pedagogy, to understand how you teach reading during a lockdown virtually, sort of by the seat of your pants in the beginning, and certainly more informed in the last school year, but it was for parents and guardians to support their learners. So during all of this, while we've been investing and we've been trying to do things, this is very exciting, but my question is how can we help parents also understand what's going on, not only in the classrooms, but to support that and mirror that and help them, gather resources or whatever to help them, because, they're still going to be very key in this. So I give a little caveat. I remember, gosh, it's got to be 25 years ago at least, attending a school council meeting, a special meeting that we put on specifically for phonemic awareness. We had our little clear plastic pockets with little, the groups of phonemic things, and we learned these things so that we could help our kids learn how to read. So is there a parallel thing for our parents? And I'm not talking only about GECPIC, I'm talking about school councils or at the school level to help parents and guardians understand and really gain some knowledge that they can support at home.
I'll start the response on that one. So a couple of things that our board does is annually we send home with every grade 1 student the Greater Essex Learning Series books. It's a series of about, I think, 5 books to help parents in the initial stages of helping their child to learn to read. So that went home just after Thanksgiving. We usually send it home in time for Thanksgiving weekend, but we were unable to do that this year. So it just went out recently to all of our families, and it helps to break down the methods to support reading. You are very correct that a very important part of what the school does is engaging parents and supporting learning overall. And those take-home reading packages are incredibly important in schools. I know I love them as a parent myself. I love them as a principal. I love them as a teacher. I think the opportunity that we have right now as we're engaging in this learning and working with our school administrators and teacher leaders is then our next step is helping parents and revitalizing those take-home reading packages with cues to help them. I think in working with GECPIC, and our parent councils in providing informative information that we would be glad to support that. But if we don't engage our parent partners, it's a missed opportunity. Again, historically, as you've mentioned, things have happened. I think we've refined our knowledge a little bit more so that we can refine that process in working with our parents and our guardians.
Thanks very much. I have a second question if no one else is.
I don't see anyone else in the chat. Is there anyone else with a first question that they would like to ask? I'm not seeing or hearing anything. I do have a question.
Okay.
I just want to echo my excitement that Trustee Burgess said. I think this program is amazing, especially since it is going to help such an enormous percentage of our students. When you're looking at 70% of students who need this kind of assistance, my daughter being one, she had struggled since day one learning how to read, and phonetics had been huge in our house and getting her to the point that she's at right now to be able to read a novel. But this has taken years, and it's blood, sweat, and tears. And I know how much this will mean to those students. And I'm so proud that we're doing this program. It's an unbelievable step. And I just want to thank all of you for your hard work. I think this is going to change the lives. I know learning to read for my daughter has literally changed her life. So I can't wait for that to happen to so many more kids. On the one screen where it had monitoring plan, it said that 5 schools were going to be chosen to kind of launch this program or get information from it. What schools have been chosen? Is there a reason that they're chosen, or just for my own curiosity?
Sure. The 5 schools that have been chosen are Marlborough, Anderden, Herman, Roseville, and Roseland. We divvy up the system for information gathering over and above EQAO data. So there are, I think, 15 schools that we're monitoring for mathematics and 5 that we're monitoring for reading. And the reason it's 5 for reading is because we're monitoring all students in kindergarten through to grade 3. So we need to make it manageable for us to be able to collect the data 3 times a year. And then the rest of the schools we're monitoring writing data. So everybody, we're collecting data from everyone, but we're not inundating the schools with asking them for too much, if that makes any sense. We're trying to make things palatable for teachers. That doesn't mean that teachers aren't conducting those assessments themselves in their classroom. They are. It's just our coordinated effort to do that. So we take all kinds of information to help us do it. It could be previous EQAO data. It could be previous, I know in fact, it's previous EQAO data, previous system collected data. And we also try to represent both city and county. So we need to, in this case, it's a smaller group of schools. We have 1 county and 4 city schools.
Thanks so much. That clarified a lot. Trustee Burgess, if you have a second question, the floor is yours.
Yep, thank you. So quickly, and it does segue with some of the questions from previous speaker. I want to know, because this is an ongoing basis, you can't just do it 1 year and then drop it. So how are we also ensuring that the faculties of education, that we normally draw from, for example, are aligned? How do we still have associate teachers? Is that program still kind of working so that they're mentoring, the new recruits, also NTIP. So how are we making sure that there's legs to this and that it's an ongoing thing?
So in terms of the Faculty of Education's, Trustee Burgess, we're waiting for that report to come out from the Human Rights Commission. I think there's going to be a lot of recommendations around programming for students who are at faculties of education in terms of reading instruction. So we're looking forward to seeing what those recommendations are. Obviously, this is something that we can't do in a year. It's going to be continuous and ongoing. This is one of the most, as Dr. Mote said, this is one of the most important things we do as schools, is teach students to read. So we're going to be continuing to provide funding to continue with the work that's being done this year. And we will, hopefully receive some more Ministry of Education funding for literacy, and we'll continue to engage our educators in the learning moving forward.
Do you have a supplemental?
No, that's it. Thank you. I think you're right. I think the report's going to inform a whole lot, and my hope is that the funding follows it, and it doesn't take from another line, you know? I mean, it's important to support it in the right way. It has to be resourced. So it's going to yield tremendous results. So thanks.
Thank you so much. So one last time, trustees, are there any further questions? Seeing none, we can move on to the second presentation, which is a mental health update by Superintendents Korbach and Houston.
Thanks, everyone. Happy to bring this presentation to you tonight. Just a point of clarification, Superintendent Houston will not be presenting tonight on staff well-being. So this will be a presentation on student well-being and an update on some of the things we've been doing in the system to support student well-being. So she just asked me to please make that clear that, that her presentation will come at a later date. So if you will just bear with me, I'm going to share my screen and then I'll be happy to get started. Okay, I just wanted to start just by speaking a little bit about School Mental Health Ontario, which is our foundational bank of mental health resources that we're implementing at the school level across the system this year and as in past years. The real strength of School Mental Health Ontario is that these are resources that are co-created both by teachers and clinicians, I should say Ontario teachers and Ontario clinicians. So you have sort of the two expert voices necessary to really develop meaningful and useful school resources for supporting student mental health. I also just wanted to point out that School Mental Health Ontario has really begun to look at all of their resource development through an equity lens. And are currently also undertaking to review existing resources in the resource bank. And I'm using the word resource bank deliberately. The website is just an extraordinary resource full of different things for students, for staff alike to implement at the school level. So it really is a wonderful resource. And the beauty of it is it's available to all boards across the province for free. There's lots of really positive things about School Mental Health Ontario. And we've sort of aligned ourselves this year with some really key messages about mental health and also been very consistent in our delivery of those messages. So we recognize that mental health is a key condition for students to learn and flourish. We recognize the importance of compassion and empathy and the role it plays in mental health and well-being. We protect and promote student mental health through caring learning environments. We have strong mental health foundations to recognize and build on the learning experiences of the pandemic, and then we make our way together and recognize that schools are part of a wider circle of support for student mental health, which I'll talk about a bit more in the coming slides. So this was, again, something that we delivered to staff, to our school administration way back on the September 1st PD day. And then this message was taken to the school level. And we made it very clear from day one that one of our main priorities was going to be supporting a mentally healthy return to school and also reinforcing and maintaining mentally healthy schools and classrooms throughout the school year, because we recognized a number of things coming back from what was a very disrupted and disjointed school year, that there were going to be different experiences with the pandemic, and that we were going to have varied needs in terms of mental health support at the school level. So it was very clear from the beginning of the year that this was going to be a priority. Everybody's familiar with these, but I'm including them just to make a point. So what we really try to do is align our mental health action plan for the year with the strategic priorities of the board. So what you'll see on the next slide is a sort of graphic, and then 5 of the key foundations of our Mentally Healthy Schools Action Plan for the school year. And what I've done is I've just sort of coded them relative to how they fit into our system strategic priorities. So we obviously recognize the protective and promotive influence of schools. We are identifying and working to address emerging mental health needs, looking to mobilize focused support for those disproportionately impacted. So you'll see in the first 10 days that there's a real focus on looking at the importance of student identity, the importance of feeling welcome and belonging. So that's where you'll see part of that particular action item mobilized. Looking to build and sustain strong safety nets, and that happens on a number of levels in our school. And I'll show you the sort of pyramid of intervention that we're applying in just a minute, and you'll see sort of what that looks like. And then hopeful and aligned communication, so that we're all sort of speaking a similar language when we speak about mental health, and that speaks to the mental health literacy work that we're doing as a board, and also maintaining a kind of culture of hope and kindness within our schools as an aspect of promoting student mental health. So this is something that we shared with teachers, and one of the things that we've really focused on with our staff and our administrators is really what is the role of school staff and school administrators in terms of promoting student mental health. And really, we've drawn a very clear distinction that the expectation is that we are not mental health professionals. What we are caring adults who provide welcoming and inclusive environments for students. And so we've come back to this a number of times in terms of, what are the day-to-day core sort of things that we do in our schools to promote, mentally healthy classrooms and mentally healthy schools. And some of them seem sort of self-explanatory, but I think going back to this and reminding again and again that these are the things that you can do on a daily basis that have a significant impact on promoting a mentally healthy classroom, and making kids feel as though they're safe and they're welcome, that they can be themselves, and those are things that we focused on regularly throughout the year in terms of our approach to student mental health. So I mentioned earlier kind of how we're viewing our role in promoting student mental health in our schools. And really most of our work happens at that bottom level of the pyramid, some things that we do for all students. And you'll see a lot of the themes from the action plan sort of play out in that bottom level, that sort of foundational school and classroom things that we do. And the bulk of our work then as educators happens there. So that's stuff that we're doing for all of our students. And then you have the kind of middle layer where we work at prevention, we work at ongoing support. We're looking at building skills and resiliency through targeted, classroom-based lessons and activities that promote positive mental health. And then at the top, there are those cases where we do have to be aware and be able to recognize some of the signs that we may need to intervene a little bit more significantly, perhaps access school mental health supports like a social worker, look to community agencies for a greater level of support. So this is how we've sort of laid it out for our administration and staff across the system in terms of where our priorities are in terms of supporting student mental health, and then what are some of the different needs that we're going to encounter over the course of the year, and then also what to do, when you are looking at something that we're doing, things that we're doing for all students, things that we need to do for some of our students, and then some of those things that we need for a smaller number of our students at the top of that pyramid. So I referenced this earlier. So this was one initiative that we put into place to support student mental health. And this is a wonderful resource that comes from School Mental Health Ontario. And it's a resource that was also developed last year, but there was a revised version this year. So We implemented the first 10 days in every classroom across the system, in every grade, in every program. That was the directive to our staff, that we were going to implement the first 10 days for every student in the system. Staff were given a significant amount of flexibility to leverage their expertise with the particular course, grade level, program that they were offering, and to use these activities and lessons in ways that were appropriate, given the environment in which they were working. But I want to go through, because I think what you're going to see is a really sort of progressive focus for what we're saying students really need in order to feel welcome and included and mentally healthy at school. So day one, which was Tuesday, September 7th, the activities were all focused around a welcome back, get to know each other, be comfortable, feel confident. We recognize that day one, for many of our students who have had, a very disrupted couple of years, might be a difficult day in terms of coming back, getting back into a routine. For some of our students, it may have been their first ever experience in-person learning. And for some of our students, it might have been the first time they had been, in an in-person classroom since, I guess it would be March of 2020, excuse me. So we recognized how important it was to really focus on welcoming back on day one. On day two was sort of an extension of that and looking at co-creating classroom norms. And I like this description here, that norms, unlike rules, are an agreement among members of a classroom or school, and norms about how we're going to treat one another. So really speaking to that mutual respect, speaking to that we are a community in this classroom, and everybody's voice has value, and everybody's voice matters. And then we worked into activities across the system, asking students to recognize the ways they're unique, and to promote how their uniqueness is valued. And that was sort of in line with this recognition that the pandemic has amplified some of the inequities and injustices in our society. So really speaking to the value of our uniqueness and the things that make us ourselves, and focusing on that in the classroom environment. For the next 3 days, we started working on some skills and strategies for managing emotions, and you can see there that the next days up to day 9 were all sort of focused on social emotional learning. So day 4 focused on identifying and managing emotions. And then day 5, which was September 13th, looked at stress management and coping. So activities all around that. Positive motivation and perseverance. So if you're thinking about, that tiered intervention model that we looked at just a few slides ago, you can really see that playing out on the implementation of these activities, as the first 10 days progress. The day on September 15th, we looked at healthy relationship skills, and then students talked the next day about self-awareness and identity, and growing and learning to appreciate their unique and individual identities. Day 9 looked at critical and creative thinking, specifically around focus, instruction, retention, skills around multitasking. And then the last day of the first 10 days was kind of a review, taking stock of all of the skills learned in the first 9. And then the goal then is to continue to build that toolkit with skills and strategies for managing and promoting mental health throughout the rest of the school year. So the first 10 days was a pretty significant undertaking in that, it did require teachers across the system to implement this in unique and appropriate ways, given the classrooms they were teaching in, the programs they were teaching in, the grades they were teaching in. But we had a lot of positive feedback from staff around just, having this clear focus and kind of knowing what to do for the first 10 days to support student mental health. Another thing that we are really promoting this year is mental health literacy. And so we have lessons from grades 1 to 8 that are tied to the health and phys ed curriculum that teachers have access to. And then we also have a secondary set of lessons as well. And the whole focus behind mental health literacy is understanding kind of the key components of mental health, but also really promoting a kind of common language around how we speak about mental health, and really trying to build that capacity amongst our staff and students so that we're all speaking a similar language when we talk about mental health. So this is the elementary version of the resources. And there are cross-curricular connections to language and arts. There's options for extending learning in each of these lessons outside of the focus of the individual lesson. They've been developed so they're appropriate for either in-person or virtual instruction. So these were also delivered in our virtual school settings, and there were adaptations in each of the lessons to allow for that. This is another thing that we've provided for teachers as a resource that they can use in their classroom. The secondary version of this focuses on 4 particular areas. So knowing the facts about mental health, knowing yourself, how to help yourself, and then what you can do for others, if they are need your support in terms of their own mental health. And then in addition to that, we've instituted a monthly mental health focus across the system. And so the structure of this really works like this. So we have our system principal and vice principal meetings every month. And so then we do a little session with them around a particular mental health strategy. That then goes to the next staff meeting in their individual schools, and it's presented to staff. And then the next step is that it's implemented at the school level. So obviously September, our big focus was on a mentally healthy return to school, kind of rooted in the first 10 days activities that we implemented. In October, we talked about self-care and gratitude practice. And so those things you can do to take care of yourself throughout the day. We sent out a chart to the whole system that was a really nice sort of summary of things that you can do. And so what can you do for yourself if you have 1 minute? What can you do if you have 5 minutes? What can you do if you have 10 minutes? What can you do if you have 30 minutes? And just simple things, like calling somebody up and thanking them for, something they may have done for you, showing kindness to somebody else, or, even something as simple as pressing your toes against the bottom of your shoes if you only have 1 minute, as a kind of mindfulness, being present in the moment type exercise. And then our November focus, which is aligned with our anti-bullying theme for this year, is Cultures of Kindness. You'll see the little book there called Be Kind. And one of the things I should also mention about the School Mental Health Ontario resources, there were a lot of resources that came along in the form of different books for the elementary level. So we purchased all of those and sent copies out to the schools. And then we also purchased copies of this Be Kind book by Pat Zietlow Miller. And that will be kind of the anchor resource for our elementary anti-bullying strategy. And so we're promoting cultures of kindness. And what we've done is in the past, for Anti-Bullying Week, which is the 3rd week of November, so it's coming up, we've developed secondary and elementary lesson plans to go along with the anti-bullying theme for the year. So what we've done this year is we've rooted those lesson plans in School Mental Health Ontario resources to really make that link between promoting student mental health, equity and inclusion, and anti-bullying. The secondary and elementary lesson plans that were developed this year as part of the anti-bullying strategy are all rooted in School Mental Health Ontario resources. And you'll notice that December to June says to be determined. So that's by design and by recognition of the sort of fluidity and sort of ever-changing nature of the last couple of years of school. And if we've learned anything about the pandemic, I guess conventional wisdom tells us we should be planned ahead from September to June. I guess the last couple of years have maybe challenged that conventional wisdom a little bit. So we're really trying to be responsive. We're really trying to model our mental health focus around what we're hearing from the system, and then around sort of other initiatives that are happening in our schools. So we're really trying to create an alignment between our focus on mental health and all of the other things that we're doing as a system. Another initiative that we've got going this year is something called the Wellbeing Pop-Up. And this is a program for students in grades 7 to 10. And the really cool thing about it is that you can actually tailor it to the individual needs of your school. So there's a variety of different speakers, there's a variety of different activities, and every school has sort of the ability to create their own 5-hour program based on what they think the individual needs of their school are. The presentations all have an equity focus, and they acknowledge things like uncertainty, isolation, and other worries that students might be experiencing, based on our current circumstances. And then also provides them with sort of useful tools for, developing resilience and perseverance skills. So we are piloting this year. So we've got 4 of our elementary schools and 2 of our secondary schools piloting this program. And we're going to look to staff to provide some feedback from those schools, after they've had their wellbeing pop-ups for the year, and get a sense of the value that we see in this program, and is it something that we want to implement more deeply within the system. So as always, and I know that Sharice Pauly, our supervisor of social work, is also on the line. Currently all of our schools have access to social workers for students. So we've got a social worker assigned to each one of our buildings. The role of the social worker is really twofold. They do support at the school level in terms of providing counseling or other mental health supports for students, but they also play a really significant role in connecting students and families with community agencies that provide mental health support. They also can provide education and school presentations around topics around mental health. Very proud of how a robust social work program in our board, and it is something that we utilize quite regularly in terms of supporting student mental health. And then we've also got other board staff that contribute. So obviously our school and board administration, our psychological services department, our school social workers, our support staff, our teaching staff are all working in collaboration to support student mental health. And I just wanted to highlight one such collaboration. And I want to be very clear that this is something that was started before I was in this role. I can take absolutely no credit for its creation, but it's just a really wonderful example of a group of people coming together to develop a really useful resource that has a mental health focus, but also a focus on other things, other needs within the system. So the genesis of this particular resource was the removal of discretionary suspensions up to grade 3 and providing teachers and administrators with some tier 1 and 2 interventions for things like promoting positive behavior support systems, teaching social emotional skills, general classroom management. And I don't know if you can see from the slide, but there's a number of links in the document. Some of them link to School Mental Health Ontario resources, some of them link to other resources. But this was a collaborative effort by our social work department, our psych services department, our behavior department through our special education department, and also some school administrators from across the system. So, when we talk about that collaborative effort and sort of varied contributions to supporting students in our system, this is just a wonderful example. So we launched this just last week to our administrators across the system. And the message that was sort of sent was, while this was initially focused on, K to 3, really a lot of the strategies in here are adaptable and implementable, across the system in all grades from K to 12 and in a number of different programs. So I thought it was just worth highlighting as, how we sort of bring multiple areas of our system together to create a useful and helpful resource to support students. And finally, I just kind of wanted to come back to this and talk just a bit about messaging, because we've tried to be really deliberate and concise and clear with our messaging around mental health. One of the messages we continue to send to our staff is that, you know, a sort of necessary element of supporting student mental health is also supporting your own mental health. And I know that's a bit of crossover into Superintendent Houston's presentation on staff mental health, but we've just sort of made that very clear that it's important, that that's foundational in terms of supporting students. That we have to keep a focus on the intersection between learning, equity, and mental health, that it's never been more important, and that we all play a role in a broader system of care. So when we think back to that pyramid of intervention I showed a bit earlier, that we're one aspect of a really wide sort of system of supporting students in terms of their mental health. That there are strategies and resources to support us in this work from School Mental Health Ontario. I can't say enough about it. It really is a wonderful resource bank. And again, the power of it is that they aren't just good resources that we have access to for free. They were developed in Ontario by Ontario clinicians and Ontario teachers. So that's become our foundational resource in terms of supporting student mental health across the system. So that's all I have in terms of presentation slides. I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you for that presentation. Those two little boys are really cute up there on that screen.
Oh, sorry. No, I was trying to get the screen back up, but yes, those are my little guys.
They're cuties. Trustees, do we have any questions? Trustee Higgison.
Thank you very much for that. And through you, Madam Chair, thank you, Superintendent Corbach, for that very comprehensive presentation, which I'm sure only touches on but a small portion of everything that's going on, even though there's so much packed into that presentation. And I know that before COVID, we were very concerned about the mental health of our students, and now it's compounded. And so taking all of that into consideration, having a resource like School Mental Health Ontario just put some of those tools and solutions at our fingertips, and I'm grateful that we're using them as part of our board strategy as well. My question was about, so it's kind of touched on it in many places, and I think maybe in the first 10 days of school, it may be connected in there at the classroom level, and I just missed that context. But in that kind of pyramid where you talk about kind of at the bottom where we talk about partnerships and inclusion and all the ways that kind of we can help everybody, I'm wondering about student to student connections and how we're facilitating those, because we heard earlier about being in quarantine for so long, and I know I have teenagers at home, and being, you know, there was a lot of supports maybe for younger students to be able to do things online, but the older students and teenagers sort of, we got missed a little bit. I can't send my kids to the park when they're 15. So so that connection to each other really needed some tentacles within their classroom environments and with the teachers they trust as the kind of framework for that. So I'm wondering what the student to student connections have been like and how those are being facilitated in maybe some of these first 10 days or in some of the things that we have moving forward.
Yeah, and thank you for the question, and through you, Madam Chair. I can tell you that in the resources that we've sent out for Anti-Bullying Week, there's sort of three categories of resources, one around acts of kindness, one around gratitude practice, and then another around sort of building community type exercises. And so one of the activities in there is all about creating connections, maybe with someone that you might not otherwise have reason to connect with. So, you know, looking to reach out to somebody that maybe you're not, that you haven't built as much of a relationship with as somebody else. Also looking sort of catching people in acts of kindness and acknowledging them. So some of those student-to-student connections are actually built into some of those resources we've sent out. And that one around the acts of kindness related to our anti-bullying lesson plans that we've sent out for November anti-bullying week, and then obviously beyond for the rest of the school year, really hit on that student-to-student connection and strategies for sort of deliberately engaging in that at the classroom level.
That's really great. I just have supplemental to that, Madam Chair, if I could. Yeah, and I'm sure, I mean, we just saw the kind of slow progressive return of extracurriculars and stuff, which I'm sure having that base of knowing what tools are available to them, it has maybe helped them to feel invited back into that space in a very healthy way. So I'm grateful that they had that framework to start with. And talking about that, creating connections, I'm wondering about this, and this may be in the works, about presenting some of the School Mental Health Ontario resources, because they're free and available, to GECPIC, and to kind of create that that parent connection, and to provide parents with tools to maybe, to your point at the end, take care of themselves as well, and using resources that mental health can sometimes be a financial leap for people. And having some free resources that are endorsed at the school level and reinforced by students, their own students that are coming home. I'm wondering if there's a kind of a shift over to present some of this and to provide these resources to parent councils through GECPIC, and certainly at the school levels as well.
So I can start the answer, and then I'll turn it over to Charisse. I see she's popped up there, so thanks, Charisse. So actually, part of what we've done with the anti-bullying strategy, and also as our schools develop their school-specific anti-bullying plans, is part of the requirement there is that they engage student voice and engage parent voice in terms of promoting some of these practices in schools. And obviously, we are linking that whole notion around the culture that we create in school with being consistent with promoting positive student mental health. So that's sort of one avenue to connecting parents. I'll turn it over to Charisse to follow up on that.
Yeah, that's a great question, but we can certainly present, and I think that's a great idea. But really, parents right now can go onto the website of School Mental Health Ontario. There's categories for professionals, the educators, for parents and families, as well as students. So they can access the resources on their own as well, because it's right there available. It's again, you don't need a password to get in it. It's just a resource, certainly that they can access, because there is tips how to take care of yourself, tips when to seek help for your child who might have mental health concerns. So there is a lot of resources. We have last year sent out those resources to the system, but you're right, we can do these presentations. I think it's a great idea for our parent council meetings.
This is really excellent work. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much. Trustee Sartori.
Thank you. I just want to start by saying thank you for your presentation. This is really important work being highlighted here for a really important need. I have a two-part question related to outcomes. So you had mentioned two specific programs or strategies, School Mental Health Ontario and Wellbeing Pop-Up. And you had mentioned feedback from staff on, I think, one of them. And so I'm just wondering if there is maybe a research component here at all, or whether it's possible to understand along the way what impact these strategies are having, and in particular, feedback from students.
Yeah, thank you for that question. We do have a plan in the works to provide a survey to students, and then survey them again at the end of the year with the same set of questions around things like mental health literacy, your sort of personal perception of your skill set in terms of, managing things like stress, managing, promoting healthy relationships, and your perception of your sort of mental health toolkit, from a couple of sort of months into the school year to the end. So that's in the works, and that's something that are going to do. And then the pop-up, what we really want is to get some feedback from staff and schools. As I said, they can sort of tailor it to their individual needs. So I really want to get a sense of you know, the value that they saw in that, whether, you know, it actually resulted in what we thought it was, or at least it proclaims to be, which is a program that actually can be really customizable. But just their sense of, you know, student reaction to it, and whether they found value in it. So that's in the works as well, to get some feedback on the value of that program.
That's great. Just one small supplemental question, please, Madam Chair. Okay, and what ages of the students would you be intending to collect feedback from?
So we would probably look at it system-wide. There may be some younger grades that, you know, we might want to reconsider, you know, how we do that. I'm not sure a standard survey across the system is appropriate, you know, given, you know, for obvious reasons. So it's a very good question. Our plan is to put a survey out, but acknowledging that that may not be appropriate across all grades. So certainly we'll look to find other ways of getting feedback from students across the system.
Okay, thank you very much again, and I look forward to hearing more. Thanks.
Are there any further questions? I don't see anything. I don't see anything in the chat, nor do I see any hands up right now. I do have a question. So if anyone else has a first question, please feel free to indicate in the chat or put your little yellow hand up. But we're still in the midst of this pandemic. People say that we're out of it, or we're leaving it, but we're not. We're still in the midst of it. Our students have all experienced various levels of degrees of how this has affected them. But I think we can safely say that everyone across the world has experienced some sort of trauma from this pandemic. And I think it's the first worldwide pandemic in modern history where we can all say we have been affected by this in some way, shape, or form. I'm so happy that we have a focus on mental health. I think it has to be the focus this year, both for parents and for students. And I'm just looking at the different kinds of learning going across our board right now, and where those students might be. Those students who are at home still learning, like my own children, through no fault of their own. But I know the struggles that the children at home might still be facing. They're still isolated from their friends. Our virtual school teachers are doing their very best, but they are definitely in a different position than the children in our brick and mortar schools. So I just wondered, are those supports that you spoke of tonight being expanded and extended to both our virtual school teachers and students in elementary and secondary? Because I really think it's necessary for those students who are still learning in the same method most of their peers got out of in September.
So I'll take the first, and thank you for the question. So when you say the mental health supports, are you referring specifically to the school-based supports like social work support?
I am programming social work supports. Okay. Just I know that there has been some aspect of mental health. There's meditation, there's yoga, but just understanding the challenges that these kids who are still at home might be facing, as opposed to some in the brick and mortar school, where it's more hands-on and the teachers get to know them a little bit better and see the visual signs of mental health, or might catch something that, you know, a parent might not.
So certainly any mental health supports that are available to students in brick or mortar schools are available to the students who are, you know, engaging in virtual learning. So any of those school-based supports, you know, any of the resources that we've developed, the School Mental Health Ontario lessons and activities are all being, you know, implemented also at the virtual schools as well as our brick and mortar schools. But I'll turn it over to Ms. Polly because it looks like she wants to have a follow-up answer to that as well.
Certainly, if you're talking about tier 2 or tier 3 support, certainly we are still providing the virtual counseling through Microsoft Teams. We have been doing classroom presentations. We certainly did that through the summer with the grade 8 transitioning into grade 9. We did presentations that was highlighted, I think, the last board meeting. And so certainly we do provide social work individual kind of support through social workers. I hope that answers your question.
It does. I was just wondering, maybe a suggestion as well to maybe send out some of the mental health tips or resources maybe on EDSB for those parents who aren't a part of parent council or GECPIC or who are at home, and that way they have better access to it, because I know parents are very overwhelmed right now. Just a lot of trying to work from home or juggling so many different issues of mental health themselves that this pandemic has brought on, and having that access at their fingertips rather than having to go search for it, I think will go a long way just to make their mental health and the mental health of our learners just a top priority.
Yeah, I mean, there is certainly a great resource that I can think of top hand is around the everyday mental health resource cards that actually we gave to every elementary teacher years back. But certainly those cards are accessible, and you're right, we should highlight that. That way, anybody can go on to, again, the website, School Mental Health Ontario. They do have that for the elementary section. I know that they are developing those cards for the secondary panel. But again, I know that during the summer, there was different, different activities that we were providing support to. And I certainly did copy some of those resources, and I did provide it to parents. So they were able to do that. And of course, there's so many that there's on there, so you can pick and choose as a parent, which one is appropriate for you to utilize. There's small little activities that take like 5 or 10 minutes.
All right, thanks so much. Are there any other questions before we move on? I don't see or hear any, so thank you so much for that presentation. And we will be moving on to the third presentation of the evening, which is by Dr. Howitt, Roads to Freedom Release.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're very pleased to announce the release of the third edition of the Greater Essex County District School Board locally developed elementary and secondary African Canadian Roads to Freedom documents. These documents were the vision of former trustee Shelley Harding Smith. She introduced a motion in 2002 requesting the formation of an advisory group of experts and educators to examine and make recommendations on the inclusion of Black history into our curriculum. Her motion resulted in the very first release of African Canadian Roads to Freedom in 2004. Recognizing that many residents of Windsor and Essex County are descendants of those who followed the Freedom Trail north, the Greater Essex is pleased to honor the important role that African Canadians have played in the cultural, political, social, and economic progress of our community. The resource is intended to provide educators with background information on local African Canadian heritage, history, contributions, and culture connected directly to specific learning expectations in the Ontario curriculum. Roads to Freedom contains inspiring stories of African Canadians who survived, persisted, innovated, created, as well as deployed democratic values and strategies to resist the racism that they faced. When students learn how Black Canadians have contributed to building this nation through their ingenuity, their hard work, and cultural creativity, it undermines the racist stereotypes of the past. By speaking and organizing against oppression that they faced, Black Canadians have provided the quintessential model of democratic participation that we can all emulate. This current revision was completed by a very dedicated team of local community experts and Greater Essex educators. So it reflects the most current African Canadian history culture, as well as ensuring that suggested classroom activities reflect contemporary educational practice. A very, very sincere thank you to Irene Moore-Davis, Dr. Christina Simmons, our very own Chantel Browning-Morgan, and teacher consultant Jan Foy for their outstanding contributions, their leadership, and their exceptional partnership. It is our intent that the African Canadian Roads to Freedom documents will serve as an invaluable tool to our staff as a reference tool in our pursuit of equity and inclusion in our board and in our school communities, and that we celebrate the diversity of all programs, practices, and people in the board and the community. So we're really excited. On Friday, November 12th, all Greater Essex educator, teacher leaders, support staff, and formal school leaders have the opportunity to engage in professional learning. We have a keynote speaker, Dr. Mohammed Khalifa from Ohio State University. He is the author of Culturally Responsive Leadership. He will be presenting a keynote address for an hour on culturally responsive teaching, learning, leading. We then have a 20-minute video entitled The North is Our Canaan for all staff to see. And at that point, the staff will have the opportunity, elementary, to engage in a Bright Space module on Roads to Freedom, and secondary to engage in a Bright Space model on Roads to Freedom. There's a beginning introductory piece for all to do, and then teachers would then go to either their grade level or their content area to make connections to Black history, culture, and people based on their content specialty or their grade level. So we're really excited about that and just wanted to share that with our Board of Trustees. If you have any questions, I'm glad to answer them.
Thank you so much for that. Are there any questions for Dr. Howitt? I don't see any. I don't see any in the chat. Trustee Burgess, my chat is very slow this evening. Are there any questions that I could be missing?
I don't see any. I think we're probably all waiting for November 12th.
Yeah, that's wonderful news. I think this is a great resource, and I know it's been years of work, so congratulations. And I think that our district is very, very lucky to have this document moving forward. Oh, Trustee Hickison has a question.
I don't actually have a question, but I wanted to point out that I checked my mail very late, but Windsor Life magazine has an article about our Roads to Freedom document and highlighting our community partners that helped us develop it. So if anybody is looking for supplemental information or just looking for something else to read, the Windsor Life magazine this month does have a feature about it. So I thought that was important to point out, and congratulations on that.
Full page.
Thank you for, yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. I'm going to read it tonight. All right, so moving on to delegations. There were none at the time of the agenda prep. There was no one on the speakers list. There was no new business. There were no reports to be received. And so we're on to trustee question period. Do we have any questions this evening? Trustee Leclerc.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering regarding Remembrance Day is fast approaching, and I was wondering if somebody could comment on some of the activities that we may have in our various schools. So those that are watching this evening are aware of how we honor those during Remembrance Day.
I'll be happy to answer that question. Actually, this morning we sent out a detailed memo to all our staff and school administrators. This year's theme for Remembrance Day is service, courage, and sacrifice at home, around the world, and across generations. In that detailed communication is information as to resources, books that we have available in our libraries, a detailed sway with information, links to our media department, and as to resources that teachers can use in their classroom across the system, as well as a specific section on with registration links for students from grade 4 to 8 or students from grade 9 to 12, focusing specifically on Indigenous Veterans Day on November the 8th, as well as digital links to various versions of O Canada, a very detailed, comprehensive message put out to our educators to support them in their important work in helping to remember the incredible sacrifices that individuals made for the freedom that we continue to enjoy this day in our country. So we're very happy to have that information out there. And schools, teachers will do learning in classrooms, but schools do mark them with celebrations. And even during the pandemic, we also offered virtual sessions to acknowledge this very important day, which is really an educational moment in all of our schools.
Thank you. Supplementary, Madam Chair.
Of course.
So I do very much appreciate what you just outlined, and my supplemental was going to be on how we can tie in Indigenous commitment, because that's a very important element in the reconciliation process, understanding the Indigenous commitment to our nation during the world wars. But I also wonder about our people of color and the important role that they played. Do we highlight that at all?
That's actually highlighted in our Roads to Freedom documents, which will be released next week to our staff as well, prior to November the 12th.
Thank you for that. Are there any further questions?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
I have a question also.
Okay, Trustee Burgess and then Trustee Halberstadt.
Thanks, Madam Chair. All these school council elections have taken place, and I'm wondering, will we be sent lists of our school council chairs and membership for our areas soon, and who the GECPIC membership is as well?
I'm happy to respond through you, Madam Chair. We've had our first GECPIC meeting and are pleased to gather that group. We have our first planning session with the president and chair, so we'll have that information out by next week. We have the vast majority of our school council chairs have been selected, so we are in the process of compiling them into a single document. We've got one or two schools that did request a brief change while schools were updating their membership, but we'll have that information, I would think, in the next few weeks to be able to share.
Thanks.
Is there a supplemental, Trustee Burgess?
No, ma'am, that's great.
Excellent. Trustee Halberstadt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I would ask Mr. Allender, or Superintendent Allender, if he could maybe update us on the return to extracurricular activities, and also the usual question about the football. Where is that going, or has it stopped, or what's going to be the solution there, if any?
Okay, thank you for the question, and through you, Madam Chair. So I'll touch on the extracurriculars. We do have them going I believe we're going to be starting on November 22nd will be the first kick at the can with that. They do have a number of students that are providing their vaccination voluntarily to the principals right now, so they're in the process of that. I do know that WEXA is putting together schedules, and they're getting all of the teams together as well, because they're not quite sure exactly what teams are going to be there, because there may be some that are not because of our circumstances this year. So they're going to put that schedule together, and that's why it's going to take a little bit of time. It's all the logistics to it. But so far, the secondary principals have been very complimentary and are doing a great job collecting all the data. They're getting information from the students and providing it to the coaches. And then I know our staff goes through Superintendent Houston in the HR department there. As far as football goes, we have been meeting. WEXA meets. Also, the individuals involved with football meet, and the unanimous decision was that they would prefer to defer it to the spring, because of just circumstances that are going on right now. And the opportunity in the spring, we're working on that right now, looking at securing potential fields, finding out which ones we can use. But we still have to look at all of the other schedules, because golf, tennis, and cross country are also moving into that time frame as well. So that is a lot of sports. There are competing sports. There's competing students as far as, you know, having to be able to play multiple sports in that manner. But we're looking at all of that right now and trying to make it work the best we can. So that's where we are with regard to the football and the extracurriculars. I will touch on elementary because that's important too. The elementary, it'll be grade 7 and 8s. The memo I just drafted today, I sent it off to our elementary executive just to have a look at it. And then we're going to be meeting either tomorrow or the following day with the principals in elementary to start that process up as well. And I will say that the secondary principals have all mentioned to me that the student population and even the staff at the schools are extremely excited, and there seems to be just a new, well, I'll use the word excitement again because that's what they've used. There's a new excitement that's going on in their school communities.
Just a supplementary, Todd, would the elementary start back up at about the same time at the end of November as the secondary?
The elementary will start up probably, it could be a little later, but there's not as, I don't believe there's as much work that has to be done prior to it starting. Secondary is a little bit more complicated, and there's also various sports that are involved. With the elementary, we would be starting up with volleyball because that's the season that would be taking place right around this time frame.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna bring joy to a lot of people with bringing extracurricular sports back and activities. Thank you.
Trustee Chin, I have you next on the list.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. My question is regarding the quarter semester learning mode, and I heard there are a lot of complaints from parents and also from the unions that they requested to return to normal semester or yearly, study plan. I wonder if the senior administration has considered about it and make any plan on that. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's Director Kelly. I certainly, we are aware that the learning models have been challenging, and it certainly was something raised on the chairs and ministers' call today. Again, it is something we'll be looking at. It has been challenging, the number of changes too, the last while, but I know that there is a certainly, desire to get back to that regular timetable. But again, we'll have to consult with the health unit and look at and have discussions on that. So thank you. It is a provincial phenomenon as well.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Cook, do you have a question?
I do, thank you. I was just wondering, I brought this up before, and I'm still getting some parents and some staff calling me, and it's regarding the need for more staff. And I was just wondering how that was going, because we talked about it at our last meeting, and I know it's not our board, I understand that, but the fact is like, I mean, it was stated that we're not competitive financially, to staff, and I'm really concerned about what we're going to do, because there's a shortage all over the place. But this is really impacting our students and it's impacting our staff, and I'm thinking that we're going to have to get competitive in terms of attracting people to our board, and I'm just wondering, like, has there been any movement in that area? Thank you.
For you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thank you, Trustee Cook, for that question. I think that the staff shortages are, again, provincial, and again, you're right about the competitiveness in terms of pay and such. That is an issue for us. Maybe I could ask Superintendent Wilcox, or I know because in the area of special education there have been shortages, but I know that there's been some recent hiring going on. Perhaps he or Superintendent Houston would like to comment on that. We do recognize the challenges, and it continues to be something that we're watching. We've had to cancel some professional development, unfortunately, due to the fact that we don't have enough staff to be able to cover, and so that's disappointing. I don't know if the others would like to add.
So I'll join. I'm sure Mike will have something to say too. In terms of competitiveness in pay, that's in the central agreements, and so locally boards cannot change compensation. That is done through central collective bargaining at the provincial level. We are interviewing every single day for all job groups. I don't even see my team because they're always in interviews. So recruitment is definitely challenging. There's lots of, employment opportunities within our community. So it is very, very competitive. Superintendent Wilcox, anything?
Thanks, Superintendent Houston. No, you are correct. It continues to be a challenge to hire. However, we are still getting a number of applications, and we are continuing to interview. So that is a positive thing. So we're hoping that trend to get these applications continues, and we're hiring and trying to get support staff out and onto the TSS list, temporary support list, as soon as possible.
Thank you. I know it's I hear what you guys are saying, and I understand. But even having to cancel, some PD days, PA days, it's disappointing because those days are important to our staff, and I know our staff is really feeling this. So hopefully things change in the future. But thank you very much.
Are there any further questions? Oh, Trustee Hickison.
Thanks very much, and thanks for that question just before. It kind of prompted me to something else that's kind of related, and it may be tangentially related, but I'm wondering about teacher candidates from faculties of educations across the province coming into, usually I assume most of them come locally, but they may come from other boards as well. I know in the past, because of our COVID situation and cohorting, it just wasn't possible. And I'm wondering if there's a change to that, or if what conversations we're having with those partners and faculties of educations, and what that looks like as far as teacher candidates coming into to classrooms or virtual classrooms.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I'm happy to respond. We do have a change for this year. So we work diligently with the Faculty of Education. I've probably had 4 meetings in the last 4 days. They have a task at hand with almost 700 placements they're looking for. So we have an agreement whereby their COVID safety plan is reviewed and they meet our criteria in their placements. So I'm excited that the University of Windsor's faculty students will begin their first placement on November 15th, K-12. And that will be good for them and good for us. It's a very positive reciprocal relationship. We have additional placements. There's a number of programs, and we're doing our best to meet as many of the needs of that university as we can. We do have university students from a variety of universities across the province that we work with. So we have a number of students, a smaller number, 4 or 5 students from universities like Ottawa, Nipissing, Lakehead, who work through my office to do that. So we've had some placements already, about a handful, but the big group will be coming with the University of Windsor in a couple of weeks. So that's exciting for our students and staff and for them as well. And we're pleased that will be significantly better for all for this school year.
Thank you for that. I'm sure those BEd students are pleased to hear that, as our staff, to have somebody else on hand to pump up the energy in their classrooms as well. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? And Trustee Halberstadt, could you mute your microphone?
Oh, sorry.
No problem. So are there any further questions? I don't see or hear any. I'll give you just another second to get it in the chat or hands up. All right, I see none, so we'll move on to trustee question, or sorry, notices of motions by my colleagues. Are there any this evening? I don't see any in the chat or on the screen, so we can move on to announcements, and there are a number of announcements this evening. So are there any, Trustee Higgison, you can start us off tonight.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair. It is Treaty Recognition Week in Ontario this week. We are into day 2 of Treaty Recognition Week, introduced in 2016 as a strategy to educating all treaty people about history and importance of the commitments made between Indigenous and settler peoples. GECDSB has just recently recognized the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Many resources from there can be jumping off points of teachable moments, useful for diving deeper into the treaty relationships that we have locally and throughout the province of Ontario as well. And there are many opportunities, both online and in person, to listen to and hear from Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers, and I encourage everyone to take part in some of those this week and learn about some of the roots that we have in this area and in this province from Indigenous peoples, and really living out our land acknowledgement in practice. So,
thank you very much for that announcement. Is there anyone else who'd like to make one before I start my list of short announcements this evening? I do not see any right now, so I'll start. First, the Greater Essex County District School Board staff census will take place on November the 12th of this year. The results from this census will assist the board to understand the composition of its workforce and to implement initiatives to achieve a diverse workforce reflective of the broader communities of which we serve. Also, throughout the month of November, 2 of our SEAC associations, Autism Ontario and the Down Syndrome Windsor Essex, have a number of special events planned. You can visit their websites, so autismontario.com, Windsor Essex, or upaboutdown.org to find out about these important planned events and also to show your support for these 2 organizations. As well, World Kindness Day, which is certainly a favorite day of mine, is a global day that promotes the importance of being kind to each other, not only to each other, but to yourself, to your neighbors, and to our world. The purpose of this day, which is celebrated annually on November the 13th, is to help understand that our compassion for each other is what truly binds us together. And that compassion can reach across all borders and bond us all as human beings. One of my very favorite quotes is, "The world is full of kind people. If you can't find one, be one." And I challenge you to live up to this quote and practice kindness not only on November the 13th, but every single day of the year. It is one of the only things that's free in life, and it is contagious, and it does start a wave. So please practice your kindness on November 13th, but try to do something kind every day, if not for someone else, but for yourself. It's worth it. Are there any other announcements this evening before I move on? I do not see any. So just before I adjourn, I just want to mention that it is the final education meeting of 2021. Our next planned meeting will be held in February of 2022. On behalf of both Vice Chairperson Burgess and myself, I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to Dr. Howitt, Ms. Pavea, and all others who have assisted this year with the presentations, reports, and work completed. I think this year has been absolutely outstanding. I have enjoyed every presentation and learned so much about the excellent work being done across our district. And on a personal note, I would like to say a very heartfelt thank you myself. This has been a privilege and an honor serving as chair of this committee. I believe in it. I believe in the work that it does. This year's been difficult, and the support and the guidance that I have received from Dr. Howitt, Trustee Burgess, Ms. Pavea, and the rest of my colleagues sitting at this virtual table has been so appreciated. Thank you for trusting me with this position. I hope I've done it justice, and it has been truly an honor. So thank you very much. And with that, I will close the meeting and adjourn into operations and finance. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Trustee Olmsted. And I suppose I will take it from here and call this Operations and Finance Committee meeting to order, I believe, at 8:49. So our attendance for tonight is the same as previous committee meetings, with regrets from Trustee Hatfield. And I am on item 3, approval of the agenda. Can I get a mover? Trustee Leclerc, can I get a seconder?
I'll second. Trustee Cook.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, Burgess?
Yes, go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
Oh, no, sorry, that's for the public meeting. We didn't, no, never mind.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? No, seeing none. Any opposed to approval of the agenda? Okay, seeing no opposition, I will go to declaration of conflict of interest. Okay, seeing none from trustees, I will go to item E, approval of minutes from October 5th of the Operations and Finance Committee meeting. Can I get a mover? Trustee Cook. Can I get a seconder? Trustee Olmsted, I saw. Any discussion? Sure, Trustee Higginson.
Mine is very brief. Page 7, Trustee Chin's last name is spelled wrong. So if we could get that edited in the minutes, that would be great.
Okay, thank you so much. I will ask Ms. Malash to make note of that. And so with that, is there any other discussion? Okay, seeing none. Any opposition to the minutes with a slight amendment? Okay, seeing no opposition, we will go. We will consider those carried, and we will go to item F, which is business arising from the minutes. Any business arising from the minutes? No. Okay, so seeing none, we had no presentation. We have no presentations tonight. We have no delegations at the time of agenda preparation, and we have nobody on the speakers list. So we're moving right along to new business, item J1, which is a notice of motion from Trustee Burgess. I'll just quickly read it. A recommendation that a report with itemized accounting of all expenditures attributable to the budget line item named Special Funding Requests and Emerging Issues as per Appendix 8 of the GEC DSB 2021-2022 budget be prepared and presented on a quarterly basis to the Operations and Finance Committee. And Trustee Burgess, would you like to move that?
I would move it, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Sure, Trustee Higginson. Okay, so and now that it's on the floor, is there any discussion? Or actually, Trustee Burgess, would you like to speak to it first?
I will briefly, if I could.
Yes, go ahead.
If you're looking on the budget pages that are published on our website, it's on page 42, the line that I'm talking about. It's a $2 million line. It's an unprecedented amount in these unprecedented times. And it does list some of the perhaps, let me see if I can get it, the anticipated areas where it may, the budget may be available to address incremental expenses within. And they're listed as supports for anti-Black racism, remote learning models, incremental utilities expenses, and that's increased rates as well as increased usage, additional mental health supports, and then other incremental COVID-19 related costs, such as enhanced cleaning, unfunded PPE, ventilation, and other building supplies in excess of ministry funding. And then there's a note that the ministry has permitted boards to only budget 1/2 of announced COVID supports ministry guidance on the safe reopening of schools for September 2021, which in this case it said will be announced later this summer, but of course has been announced. I remind everyone that this funding line represents a portion of the 1% deficit that we incurred to ensure budget is available to address this. At an earlier meeting, Madam Chair, we heard from the director that we've already dipped into this line, I think to the tune of around $500,000 allocated for additional incremental special education expenses. In addition to our underfunded special education needs that we knew when we approved our budget. The reason I ask for this to be reported on a quarterly basis, we're going into our Grants for Student Needs GSN consultations. And when we look at the items that we anticipated, with the 5 dots on page 42, special education, for example, wasn't explicitly listed, and yet we've already dipped in there. We can't anticipate every area. And we are just entering into the time of the year that in the last couple of years have noticed a rise in in possibilities of lockdowns, etc. I don't even want to say it because it's like a dirty word, but the thing is we're moving more indoors and we don't know what some of these even incremental COVID related costs will be because we're not completely out of the woods yet. I ask that it be itemized accounting because it's important for us to know not only where $2 million goes, but to aid us in our advocacy so that we know what the incremental costs are. So many times when we get our actuals throughout the year and then we look, at our budget next year, we see where the rearrangements have gone, where our estimates might have been a little off. It's just really hard to predict everything right now. So I think if we keep on it, on a quarterly basis, and we receive that report as the opportunities for us in our meetings with, chairs and minister, with GSN consultations, with, staffing, with everything, we can look at what those incremental needs really are and how we're using it. So I hope I have good support for this. I think it's going to be important for us to monitor it for us going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Burgess. Are there any other questions or comments on this notice of motion? No? Okay. I have just a quick comment. I will be supporting this. I would agree with Trustee Burgess in that it is, as it is a fairly large chunk of money, and as it is within our purview as the Board of Trustees to pass the budget every year, that we should at least have the awareness as things are being taken from that and reallocated. And I guess one of the questions I would have then is to administration, particularly Superintendent Armstrong. Is this something that is feasible within our existing budget reporting framework? Is this motion something that you and your staff are able to easily accomplish, or would this be burdensome on a quarterly basis?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair. We already provide quarterly reporting to trustees on expenditures and budget as part of our operations and finance reporting that comes forward. So certainly any expenditures that are charged against that line item are presented already in a summarized basis. And certainly if there's information that you would like presented that's a little bit more detailed in nature, we could incorporate something in those quarterly reports that we bring forward.
Thanks so much. Are there any further questions or comments? Okay,
If I
seeing.
could, Madam Chair.
Sure, go ahead, Trustee Burgess. Yeah.
Just to that, we do have quarterly reports, so we've just never had this anywhere near this amount in an incremental amount, and specifically looking at it coming from a deficit. So that's where I really would like the itemized accounting. I like it that it aligns with quarterly reporting already, but I think it's really important for us to monitor this specifically because it is so anomalous really to what we normally would do. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that clarification, Trustee Burgess. Okay, anything further from trustees? Okay, seeing none, I will call this vote by asking if there is anyone in opposition to this motion. Any opposition from trustees, you can register it in the chat or verbally. Okay. Seeing no opposition, this motion carries, and we'll move forward. Thanks so much. Okay, so we are now on item J2, which is a notice of motion from Trustee Cheen, and I will just read it aloud for everyone. Recommendation: to fulfill the school board's accountability and the responsibility as a trustee and to provide transparency to public stakeholders, I request the GECDSB to investigate the tender procedure of 2021-63P board website redesign and provide a report to justify the decision, including why 7 tender companies are disqualified, how much they bid, how much quote they bid, and why it is awarded to the company which quote is of much higher range. Trustee Cheen, would you like to move this motion?
Yes.
Okay, and can I get a seconder?
I'll second.
Okay, Trustee Halberstadt. And any discussion? Trustee Cheen, would you like to briefly speak to the motion?
Oh, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the seconder. And this motion is just want to provide the transparency and accountability to the stakeholders. And we all know that the funding for the public school board are always huge, and we should be very careful when we use the fundings. So we normally use bid to get project effectively and efficiently, and normally we will choose the bid which of a lower cost to save the funding, but this is kind of special, and there are 7 companies. They are disqualified without even show how much they bid, and there is only 3 left, and the other 2 has much lower budget quote, and several times, even several times less than the one that we choose. I'm not saying that we shouldn't choose the highest one, but at least we should give some detailed explanation to prove that we did a good job and we are responsible for the funding for the public. So that's why I ask for clarification. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Cheen. Are there any questions or comments from other trustees?
Yeah, it's
Sure. I saw Trustee Higginson's hand first, so I'll go Trustee Higgison and then Trustee Halberstadt.
Thanks very much through you, Madam Chair. My question is to administration. Did we follow procurement policy on this this tender and this process?
Director Kelly here. I'm confident that we did, and it is very outlined in our processes that through the procurement policy, and those were followed.
Any supplemental?
No supplemental question, just that we as a Board of Trustees did just recently pass this procurement policy, and we should all be familiar with it, and I'm confident that if we have followed the procurement policy, then there's to me no need for any more reports to come back about this. So long as they're following policy, which is under our jurisdiction, then I'm satisfied with that, and so I won't be supporting the motion tonight.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Halberstadt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I am going to support it, the motion, because I think it was pretty eye-popping. The eventual price we paid for this hardware, or for this website, when the original estimates was like somewhere around 250,000 rather than what it ended up at, close to $1 million. So to me, there has to be something a little askew there, and I'd like to take a closer look at it. And I guess I'm not saying we didn't follow the rules, but we might want to take a hard look at the disparity between the initial estimate and the final cost that we paid.
Thank you, Trustee Halberstadt. I'm going to go to Trustee Leclerc, and then I see Trustee Sartori.
So I can't support the motion. I believe that we have a policy in place. I trust that our administration went through the process. There's a number of reasons why a bidder may be disqualified. Having participated previously in my other organization work, reviewing tenders and RFPs, it's quite common for companies to be excluded for any number of reasons. They have to meet all the criteria. They have to be very descriptive in the services they're going to provide. And I think that this is something that we should accept, that the process was followed by our administration. We heard that from our director.
Thank you, Trustee Leclerc, and I'll go to Trustee Sartori.
Thank you. I just to keep this part short, I agree with the comments from Trustee Higgison and Trustee Leclerc. I don't think there's any reason to doubt that the policy was followed by administration. So I don't intend on supporting the motion, but I did want to clarify and look to through you, Madam Chair, either Director Kelly or Superintendent Armstrong. So there were some numbers just indicated by Trustee Halberstadt, a difference of $750,000 between, Ken, I think you know what I'm referring to. Can I have some comment on that, please?
It's Director Kelly. I'd ask Superintendent Armstrong. I do not think there was that discrepancy, but she would have more clarity on that.
Actually, I don't want to punt the question back, but Superintendent Mills was actually part of the evaluator on the evaluation committee. I can certainly speak to the process. We most certainly did follow our procurement process. It's very regimented, but maybe Superintendent Mills could add some further clarity to your question.
Yeah, I'd be glad to add to that. There were initial costs that were involved in the project that were budgeted for, and then there were ongoing costs that were that will be incurred over a period of time, and so that's what's taken into consideration with the number that Trustee Halberstadt was talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there further questions or comments on this motion?
I have a queue in the chat.
Oh, my apologies. And I also see is there another one from Trustee Higgison, or is that the original one? Okay.
I think that's the original.
Okay. I'm so sorry, Trustee Burgess, I missed that. So please go ahead.
Hey, no worries. I don't think I'm supportive, but I would like some clarification if I could. I don't think it's wrong to question process. Particularly if we approve policy, but even in approving policy, we don't understand the machinations of actually how it happens. But I feel confident in the provincial standards for procurement in the public sector, and I feel confident in Greater Essex's procurement. So I don't want to say I doubt or I don't trust or any of those things. But when there are discrepancies, I think, questions are fair game. What I'd like to ask is, however, though, when you're looking at tenders, if you are actually reporting, because it looks like there's a public accountability and a public transparency, if in question here, a demand for it, just even sharing real details about why 7 companies are disqualified may include some damage to reputation or some hesitancy for companies to resubmit something because it's nuanced. And I think it's contextual, and I think that sometimes details have to emerge that may actually be private. I wonder if anybody can comment on that, because how forthcoming can you be? How explicit can you be in justifying a decision with 7 tender companies that are disqualified, how much they bid and the reasons why they were disqualified or why one was awarded? Like, are there some things that are private in this process?
Yes, I saw your hand, Superintendent Armstrong. Go ahead.
Thank you for that. Through Madam Chair, every time we put a proposal out for bid or for tender, there is evaluation criteria that's always developed. It's reviewed and it's approved before even the RFP process begins. All our competitive documents have to clearly outline what the mandatory items are, how those items are rated, information with respect to any other criteria that will be used to evaluate submissions. And that includes, we also will share the rating of each of those or the weighting of those criterion. That evaluation methodology and that process is fully disclosed in the RFP documents. So anybody that's bidding is aware of how that process is going to work. I know that each RFP will be different in terms of what those criterion will be. Depends on what the service or the product is that's being procured. So it's hard to make a specific statement. I can only speak to it really more generalized. I know in a lot of instances, things that are mandatory, things like the profile of the proponent. What are their staffing and their qualifications? What's the project plan, the approach? What is the schedule for the work to get done? What is the cost proposal? There's a number of items that are all part of that criteria. They're weighted, and if something is missing, even if a form is not provided and we indicate in the RFP process that it is a mandatory document, that can disqualify a bid from moving forward. So I just wanted to kind of share that information with you. Hopefully that's a little bit helpful for the process. If you have any further questions, certainly I can try and answer those. And the other thing I guess that I want to indicate is once a bid is determined to have not met the minimum threshold for the qualitative portion, or if they haven't filled out a report or a form that is required and is stated as mandatory, at that point, once it's disqualified, we don't even open the pricing documents. They're separately submitted in a sealed envelope. They don't even get opened. So in this instance, and for purposes of this report, the reason why that pricing is not indicated is because we don't know what it is. They were deemed to be disqualified based on the criteria that was publicly shared in those RFP documents, and we did not open the pricing. It didn't influence anything at that point.
Supplemental, Madam Chair?
Sure. I just saw Mr. Mayhew's hand as well. I don't know if he wants to add to that before you ask your supplemental.
Well, if I could ask my supplemental and then see if it's included, just for clarification. I understand the criteria is public, shared with the companies that are going to put in the RFP. And I understand the nuance between the qualitative and then the sealed envelope with the actual bids. However, once it has been awarded, okay, so people have been qualified or disqualified, and then the qualified ones are considered and an award has been, do we ever then, would it not be breaching something to say to all the other competitors, to let all the other competitors know what all the other competitors were disqualified for? Is that not shared somewhat privately? In other words, what part of it can be public about the qualitative part? As far as not meeting the criteria, not the upfront stuff, the afterwards, why they didn't make the cut. What can we share publicly with all the competitors?
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair, I'll start that answer and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Mayhew. Certainly there are elements of a bidder's bid or submission that could be considered proprietary or confidential because it does release a pricing structure that may create an unfair or competitive disadvantage if they are bidding again on a similar project with another entity and that information becomes widely known. So oftentimes there may be elements of that we would not share for those reasons. For those reasons. And also, we try to be transparent in preparing these reports that do come forward to trustees, where at the same time, there were a lot of tenders that came through on that report as well. And where do you know how much detail you need to provide versus what is sufficient? I mean, it's a judgment area, so I'm happy that's why we have these conversations and have those discussions to clarify the information that is in our reports. And Mr. May, if you have anything further to add, I would welcome that. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, I just did want to add that there is an element of risk here in sharing the results or the submission of a bidder's tender with another bidder. It opens up the board to risk and scrutiny. We have to be aware of that. The evaluation criteria is confidential between the members of the evaluation team, who also sign a declaration of conflict of interest, and we have to ensure that evaluation criteria is not shared with other bidders. It opens up some subjectivity. They could question that. At times, we may give feedback to a proponent that is not successful. That feedback would not be specific to the evaluation criteria and all our confidential notes that are held with the purchasing team. So I just want to be clear here that we want to be careful that we're not sharing those internal notes and that evaluation criteria.
Thank you, Mr. Mayhew and Superintendent Armstrong. Trustee Cook, I saw your hand. Do you have a question now?
Thank you. Anyways, really quick, I just want to say I appreciate the comments from Trustee Higgison, Leclerc, Sartori, and I agree with them. I cannot support this. I have confidence in our administration that we're doing it the right way, and we already have a policy established. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Trustee Cook. And any further comments from other trustees? Sure, Trustee Chin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the comments of the trustees and superintendents. And I want to clarify that I don't trust the senior administration. My main point is that we see the great, distance from those tenders, their budget, and is several times less. Several times difference. It's not a small difference, but this part why we choose the other, it was not explained. And even if we don't consider the 7 companies disqualified, the other 2 companies qualified, they are also pretty decent companies, and they have their technical experience, and they gave a much lower budget. So I think we should question why they do this. At least they should give some explanation. If it's not publicly okay, but privately it should be. I think it's okay to ask. It's not it does not mean that we don't trust them. And we do have the responsibility to make sure that our policy is followed and all the fundings are efficiently used. So monitoring is also our responsibility. So I kind of not, agree with some trustees that they said the policy is there and we let it go. It's not what we should do, right? And also, I want to tell some, stories that I heard from other community, experienced people from community, and they said that public school board fundings are kind of easy to use, and some bidders, some companies, they kind of cooperate to take turns to get the bid. And when they bid some big project, they may, discuss previously in advance and take turns to give a little bit difference the bid. And so everybody can get a great benefit from those fundings. And I'm not saying that it's happened to our board, but it's kind of, behind the scene, and it often happens. So that makes us have to take extra cautiousness to be careful, and how our purchase budget is handling. So that's why I think it's okay to just ask a clarification. And I don't think it should be, initiate a lot of offenses on that. I think it's just our normal procedure to ask why and give a, explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Chin. Any other further comments or discussion? I have a final comment. So,
can I ask a question of the mover through you, Madam Chair, just for clarification on the motion?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So through you, because I don't see an amendment, I don't hear an amendment, and what I see in the motion is contrary to what I think I just heard. It says here to provide a report to justify the decision, including why 7 tender companies are disqualified. And I heard in the explanation that there is a risk involved in disclosing proprietary information, so bidder to bidder. So I don't hear an amendment. I just want to hear from the mover. Is it still the intent to provide a report to justify the decision, including why 7 tender companies are disqualified?
If you think that's not, doable, I can just delete this part. What I want to do is just want a further clarification about this project. It's not really want to, deny something or some. I just want a clarification to show that we care about the funding of the public, and we do want to make sure that all the money is spent, reasonably. Because I have a degree in master's degree in computer science, and I have already organized the website design project here in North America. So I have a little bit common sense on that, and I believe it's kind of not, within my imagination about so much money put on this. And especially with the other 2 qualified tenders, they give much lower price.
Trustee Chin, I think just to answer the question, or to go back to Trustee Burgess's question, is anyone, I guess, putting forward an amendment to the motion at this time, or are we just going to vote on the motion as is? I think if anyone would like to put forward an amendment, but I think that we should stick to the motion currently.
My
Yeah.
question, Madam Chair, is exactly that. It's sort of in two parts, transparency, et cetera, to investigate the procedure. And that to me means, have we gone through the process following the policy? And then it gets very specific, and it doesn't speak to anything else except to justify the decision, including why 7 tender companies are disqualified and what they bid, et cetera. So with the explanation I heard, I think I got my question answered, but I can't support it. I think it puts us at risk, is my conclusion, on proprietary information. So I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just going to give a final comment, Trustee Cheen. So at this time, I think when you look at the 3 parts that are being asked of us, number one, why 7 tender companies are being disqualified. We've heard from administration that that's not really possible, or information that we're able to be given that might put us at risk if it's in the public domain. How much quote they bid, we're able to see that publicly. That's in the report that was provided to us at the last Ops and Finance meeting, and why it is awarded to the company which quote is of a much higher range. We also heard from administration tonight that those pricing structures and that information within our purchasing committee, it must be kept confidential. So maybe that this is a conversation that Trustee Cheen can have further with administration at this point, but I think at this point we should call the vote, because administration has spoken, and as well as all of trustees. So what I'm going to ask is all trustees register their vote, whether it's in the chat or it's verbally, and we will go from there. I'll give everybody 30 seconds or a minute to register their vote. So far, we have 5 opposed. I don't see all trustees having registered their votes, so we're only at 5 in the chat having opposed.
Trustees, Madam Chair.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I can't, it won't take my vote, so I'm just going to say I'm opposed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and that brings us to 6. I forgot we were short 1 trustee tonight, so 5 would have defeated the motion anyhow. So thank you, Trustee Cook, though, for registering your vote. I too am opposed, and so that motion does not pass. So we will continue on our agenda. We are on item K, reports, and the first report that we have in front of you is K1, which is the trustee expenditure report. I don't believe that administration has any comment on this one. It's pretty straightforward. They provide it every year. Are there any questions or comments from trustees on this one?
Burgess, question?
Sure, go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
Through you, Madam Chair, and I'm sorry I didn't give anyone a heads up on this, but I did want to ask about on the line that says Trustee Julia Burgess County. I think everything is correct. I believe under professional development, I believe that was for an OPSPA event. I'm wondering if that was assigned to the OPSPA budget. It was either an AGM or, or PES. I mean, both of them would have been virtual, but I think there would have been a cost associated with that. I'm wondering if that was assigned to the central OPSPA budget, which is a different budget line than personal PD. And the other question I have is under miscellaneous, and I'm thinking from the listing that mostly is assigned to a new laptop I received when mine died. I just want to make sure. I don't know if Mr. Mayu can help me with that.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, I can speak to this. The professional development piece, it may have related to OPSPA because it didn't, it wasn't in excess of the minimum amount that is allocated to you. We just left it on that line. It could have been, I guess, reclassified to the OPSPA line if it does relate to OPSPA. But you can see it's a similar amount Trustee Higgison incurred. I think it was a split transaction amount for a total cost that was charged by Ms. LeBoeuf for a PD session that was attended. I don't have the particulars in front of me for that. I can look into that though and get back to you. As far as the miscellaneous goes, I did look at that. It does relate just to, I believe, internet and phone. And I believe that there were a couple of months that were picked up from the prior year in this year due to a timing issue. And that's why it may look a little high. So it may include a few more months than the 12 months.
Yeah, that seems like a lot just for internet and phone. And I know that is centrally billed. So thank you for that. I would like to, I mean, you know, we're receiving this, so we're receiving it. But I would like to for you to look into that central amount, because you can see underneath the uncategorized central items, official representative at OPSPA. Both Trustee Hickison and I are, you know, directors and or alternates. And we would need to attend those things as part of our duty. It's not professional PD. Tomorrow, for example, is a regional meeting. I'll be there. So any of those, you know, the only things that we would have, I would think, would be the AGM. Because I don't think there's, well, I don't know if there was a cost to PES, but at any rate, I would like for you to look into those and to assign it to the official representative at OPSPA line if it is OPSPA business, which I believe is the only thing I attended. With the registration.
I think likely Mr. Mayhew's made a note of it and can double check it, and I think that'd be appropriate to bring it up at our next meeting for business arising from the minutes. So I'm just to put a star next to it to follow up with administration for sure.
Perfect, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Well, can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, Trustee Chin.
Oh, on the page 11, the miscellaneous, and it is said that a board approved equipment packages that includes a computer and shredder, and I wonder if you would provide shredders to trustees, because we have a lot of documents and needs to be shredded. Page 11.
Sure. Yes, I'll look to somebody in administration. I mean, to be honest, Trustee Chin, this just might be a conversation offline via email. I believe that as it's in our policy, it can be something that is part of the equipment package. I think that can be discussed. So unless somebody from administration wants to speak to it, I think that this can definitely be followed up on, though. Are there any other comments or questions? And Trustee Chin, are you okay if you can follow up via email as well on this one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on this report? Okay, seeing none, I will go to report K2, accounts receivable written off for the year ended August 31st, 2021. To be received. Any questions on this one? No questions or comments. Okay, I will go to K3, Resiliency Infrastructure Funding Update, pages 13 to 17. This is just an update on the funding that we received and some of the work happening around our board right now. Were there any questions or comments? I know that administration hadn't prepared any presentation for this one. Sure, go ahead, Trustee Hickison.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to comment and thank administration and the staff and all of our community partners and all of our contractors and all of our, this is an astounding amount of work to get done anytime. This is an astounding amount of work to get done at a time when trades and supply chains and all of that is tested. It's just an astounding amount of work to get done with our concerns to keep our kids and staff safe. And our community partners as well. It's also very not only relevant work for now, but really kind of future-proof, future planning. And I'm quite proud. We were very successful in this round of funding that was again joint between the province and the federal government. And opportunities like that don't come around very much, where they're going to partner together and agree to give us large amounts of money for things that we need not only now but in the future. And I'm so grateful to our exceptional staff who were able to not only put these things together but execute it in this spectacular way, so that not only just students and staff that are in our schools now will benefit from these projects, but moving forward. And they touch on so many different things, not just COVID, right? I mean, we have touchless water bottle stations, which are going to our eco schools, and it's really great. It's really great stuff. And so I just wanted to congratulate you and say thank you very much. And on behalf of, I know constituents from my area have been saying that they are grateful to see some of these projects get finished, and they're grateful to see this investment, and I am as well. And so on behalf of them and on behalf of all of us, I say thank you very, very much.
I was just going to echo that comment, and I actually did have a question around this report, if there wasn't anything from anyone else. What has have we had to hire any additional facility services staff to execute even just coordinating these projects? I know that a lot of this work is likely outsourced, but I'm just curious if Superintendent Armstrong, you can speak to the impact on our staffing complement.
Thank you for the question. As when we presented the budget back in the summertime, the board did add one contract administrator position to assist not only just with all the CVRIS or the resiliency infrastructure funding projects, but also with all the new school builds that we have going on, and the extraordinary funding we get through school condition and school renewal funding. So we did add a position with respect to that to help manage that. Otherwise, we are doing that work with the existing staff, and they are just beyond phenomenal. I really can't say enough about the work that they're doing.
Thank you so much. And yeah, just to echo that comment, it is really exciting to see all this work being done. I know there's been, so many concerns around ventilation and all of these things, and it's been really great to have responses, and, we can show people, point them to these reports, things like that. So thank you for putting it together and providing this information for trustees publicly as well. Are there any other comments, questions on this one? Okay, no, we will go to K4, which is the single-use plastics reduction update. And I know that Superintendent Armstrong was just going to give a quick verbal update presentation around this one. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Through you, Madam Chair, I'm very pleased to provide trustees with an update on the work of the Single-Use Plastics Reduction Committee. This has been a committee it's been a true pleasure to work with. As we reported previously, the committee developed an action plan that focused on the elimination of 6 single-use plastic items by January 1st, 2022. And due to a strong team effort, a lot has occurred over the last few months to turn this initiative into reality. And as it's outlined in the report that's included in your package this evening. Just to summarize some of the work that has occurred, a request for quote for alternative products to replace plastic baggies, straws, and cutlery has closed, and the submissions currently are being evaluated. Styrofoam cups have already been removed from the system. An additional 192 bottle fill stations have been installed. These were funded through the Resiliency Infrastructure Funding Program. Science kits have been refurbished, and all single-use plastic items in those kits have been removed and eliminated. Our art and math kits are now currently being reviewed for the elimination of similar products. Environmental sustainability clauses are incorporated into RFPs and into our new contracts. We have developed communication with vendors, childcare centers, renters, and community partners, inviting them to join the board in this initiative. Through the work of the environmental and outdoor education instructors, school assemblies occurred last year and are also continuing for this year to engage students in the important topic of environmental awareness and stewardship. Single-use plastics reductions also is a topic that is part of those school assemblies. Infographics, surveys, and a slogan contest have all been shared with staff and students, and social media posts are regularly scheduled to share the messaging of this important initiative. We are developing, or in the process of developing, waste minimization training that will be presented and shared with all staff in 2022. In addition, a multi-year tender for waste audits is in the process of being drafted for issuing and awarding in early 2022. A revised environmental stewardship policy and regulation have also been drafted, and we will be bringing that forward to the policy committee as well. In addition, the board's 21-22 operational plan specifically included a goal related to environmental leadership in our community. In the appendix to the board report we have provided for you, there is a discussion about climate change and what further actions the board could implement should it declare a climate emergency. This would require the board to adopt a climate action lens to its existing structure and practices. And I'm happy to welcome Kathleen Quenville, who is our board's Environmental and Energy Officer, with us tonight to assist with answering any questions that you may have with respect to the appendix, and as well as any work with the Single-Use Plastics Reduction Committee. And I truly do want to thank all the committee members. They have been absolutely phenomenal to work with, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Sure. Thank you so much, Superintendent Armstrong and Ms. Quenville, for being here tonight as well, and for highlighting all the work that this committee has been doing. I will open up the floor for questions from trustees. Trustee Halberstadt, go ahead.
Yeah, Kathleen, I would just wonder, Superintendent Armstrong talked about declaring an energy climate change emergency. I wondered if, I guess the question would be, I think it's a good idea, but who would take the lead on this? Would your organization, or you specifically, be okay with taking the lead in that direction?
Thank you, Superintendent Halberstadt. Sorry. I'd be happy to take the lead, but obviously it's not a single person thing to do. There'd have to be a team effort, but I'd be happy to take the lead with the board, certainly.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Trustee Halberstadt, is that, do you have a supplemental question or comment there?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Superintendent Armstrong whether she thinks that Kathy plus the, I guess, the Single-Use Plastics Reduction Committee could take the lead together on forming an emergency.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I think certainly, we need a point person, obviously, to lead the initiative. The work that's involved, and it's outlined in the report, does talk about policy changes. It's mitigation and adaptation planning that takes a look at energy targets, which Kathleen would be intimately involved in assisting with, and as well as work that goes right down to the school level. Certainly the Single-Use Plastics Reduction Committee could be partners in this project. Kathy's right, it is not a single person that needs to be involved in it. It really is a whole team, a whole school, a whole system approach to addressing the issue. It's a small step. It's a global problem. It's a global issue, but it starts with one small step that everybody needs to take. So certainly we would look at partnerships in order to do this.
Thank you for that, Superintendent Armstrong. And I just wanted to jump in quickly to say that it seems like it would be a team effort, just with even some of the things that are proposed on page 25 and 26 with respect to, the active transportation, school ground greening, things like that. I know that this is some work that we're already doing, and maybe it would be captured under one umbrella, but it seems like there's many different departments within our school board that would really benefit from maybe seeing to be kind of unleashed to do more, and knowing that we have now or are potentially going to declare a climate emergency, and that might focus the lens even further. So I read this as a way of, leaning into the work that we're already doing, and that this kind of recommendation is coming out of the Single-Use Plastics Committee based on current context where we're at, but also the work that you guys have done over the last year or so. So I just wanted to jump in to say that that's how I read that, if I'm understanding correctly. So. Are there any other comments or questions or anything like that on this report? I see Trustee Olmsted. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to echo the superintendent.
Trustee Olmsted, you're breaking up a little bit. Oh, you're breaking up a little bit. I'm wondering if you shut off your video. Try.
It's a real privilege sitting on this committee. The passion that is brought to this.
Trustee Olmsted, I don't know if we're not getting everything that you're saying, unfortunately. If you would like to text it or put it in the chat, maybe I can share it and read it aloud.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just breaking up a little bit too much. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm gonna shut off my.
Okay.
That's what I just did. Can you hear me a little bit better?
Yes,
Not
a
really.
little bit. Yeah, a little bit. We're not getting everything that you're saying.
Is this?
No, it's not helping. No, not too much on my end. So I think we'll move on and maybe. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Trustee Higginson, go ahead.
I actually see that Trustee Burgess had a question ahead of me in the chat. So if she wants to go first, and then I'll go.
Yes, sorry, go ahead. Trustee Burgess and then Trustee Higginson.
Question and comment, and it's just for clarification. I think I understand it, but it just a spectacular report. So thanks so much for this update. It's sort of watching your dreams come true, I want to thank you specifically for removing styrofoam from the system. Way back in the Middle Ages, when I was taking engineering at the University of Windsor, we had many things in our materials class about styrofoam and how when you heat it, how all of those little carbon atoms on the end of that long chain got released through heat, and they're quite toxic. So not only removing something from the landfill, but really something that shouldn't really be used for anything hot. But under on page 18, I see the 6 items. And I'm assuming, obviously, that some of those items will still be in the system, but not just plastic. The way it's written, it's saying, eliminated, like takeout containers, for example. I hope we don't see any more styrofoam takeout containers, for example, or plastic ones, unless they can be reused. There are some that can be reused, but so they're not single use. But I'm assuming that list doesn't mean that those things will necessarily be eliminated. They just will not be made out of single-use plastic.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Certainly, yes, I think what we're trying to do, the objective of the committee, is to not make those items available for purchase by staff. So when you're ordering items through our web stock program and you require straws, the intent is it's not a plastic straw, it's a biodegradable straw, something that is recyclable. Same thing with respect to plastic bottles. The intent is that any cafeteria services, for example, we're not going to permit bottled water to be purchased because we have bottle filling stations. It's more challenging to stop a student or stop a staff member from bringing something in their lunch. But certainly if we can make it less easy to purchase as a system, that is ultimately what we're trying to tackle first. And then hopefully through education, we're going to be able to try and change those other elements and those other behaviors the best that we can. So I'm hoping that that answers your question. In terms of takeout containers, that's tricky too. But I know that, like if I look at David Suzuki School, that school is very environmentally friendly, and they worked very hard with their vendors for when they had takeout lunches or special food days, to work with vendors to say, if you want our business, you need to provide the food in an environmentally friendly container. So if it's a paper container, so it's doing the work associated with that too with our vendors to try and eliminate the single-use plastic element of those items. So I hope I answered your question.
You really did. Thanks very much. I just so appreciate this work. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will go to Trustee Higgison.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to note that it is very rare to hear somebody say they enjoyed sitting on a committee. And I think that not only speaks to the kind of depth of joy in the work that everybody is doing on this committee, that the sincere appreciation they have for their colleagues sitting on the committee, but the what you get to see in practice from the work that you do together in a report like this. And I'll echo Trustee Burgess, and that it's wonderful. And the fact that it came from, if you recall, 2 students who came to our board and advocated on this. It's just a really great, not only a good news story, but it's something great for the future that was started by people who will lead our future. And I'm just, I love it so much. There was a piece in the appendix. It's on page, I guess it's on page 26 of the report, or maybe 26 of our package, the last one anyway, where it's talking about ensuring parental engagement in environmental stewardship programs. And this may be a question for Superintendent Hillman, but I'm looking at parent reaching out grants and what we have through GECPIC that go to support our work in schools with parent groups. And I'm wondering if there is a connection there to parent reaching out grants or something else where we can connect those, make those kind of supported connections from school to home and engage parents in this work too.
Through you, Madam Chair, certainly potentially. I think part of the work we're really excited about at GECPIC this year is engaging deeply with school council chairs in a more deeper and meaningful way. Working with Madeline McEachran and the chair, engaging in regular monthly conversations or bi-monthly conversations with school council chairs, but taking ideas like this, but arguably all of the policy ideas that are coming out and viewing them through a parent lens is the work we're excited about doing. I think for many schools, this type of work would fit in well with the Parents Reaching Out grant. We've got weeks left still on those applications. So in conversation with Superintendent Armstrong, that might be a suggestion we can make to council chairs before the expiration of that deadline.
That's great. Thanks for that. I will note that, trustees, we are at timed items on our public agenda, but if we're okay with just kind of pushing through, I think we're almost done with this agenda and we should be okay. So if there's no opposition to that, you can probably just push through.
Yes, that sounds good with me. I did just want to note Trustee Olmsted's comments. She just said, I just wanted to echo the sentiments of Superintendent Armstrong. This committee is a privilege to sit on and is comprised of such passionate individuals. I love to listen to the ideas brought forward and then watch the collaboration happen to get the good work done. Bravo. So just wanted to share that on her behalf. And are there, there's a comment from Trustee Cheen. Go ahead, Trustee Cheen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate all the work that have been done by the committee of the plastic. And because one colleague has mentioned about the future leader, I just want to make it broader, the topic, because we focused on this one-time plastic bag, something like that. And we consider bigger issues like the nuclear waste disposal, like in Japan, and they are going to put the tons of nuclear waste waters, put that into the sea, and it didn't really, get any attention from our government or from the community, and I think it's more important. And also, our government increased the carbon tax and try to protect the environment, but it at the meantime it kind of give more difficulty for the businesses, and also and this ignored like the
Sorry,
they
Trustee Chin, is this a question about the report or the work of the committee?
I just give a suggestion. Yeah, a little bit, just a little bit suggestion. Okay, I want the board is to think, wider and give a wider leader for the students, and to really give their strategic, opinions on how to protect the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Chin. It sounded like, and Trustee Burgess noted it in the chat, Eco Schools for external advocacy opportunity. I think just to maybe clarify and not speak on anybody, I wasn't on the committee, so I don't know the intimate details, but I think this work was really about what can we do within our own board at this current moment, and not necessarily focus on some of the external issues that you mentioned, just to clarify that point. Are there any other further comments or questions on this report? No, seeing none. Okay, I will keep going on. We are now at trustee question period. Are there any questions from trustees?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Trustee Halberstadt, I was waiting for you.
Well, you'll probably enjoy this comment. I'm going to put this issue off for maybe the next meeting, given the fact that this has been a long night, and people don't want it to be much longer. And there's some more research I would like to do on this issue of VIREX.
Okay, thank you for that, Trustee Halberstadt. So there are no questions from Trustee Halberstadt at this time, which is very surprising. Anyone else have a
question, Burgess?
Sure, go ahead, Trustee Burgess. Oh, yes, I see it. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So through you, I think to Superintendent Armstrong for comment. I'm not sure. The province of Ontario recently announced a rise to $15 per hour for minimum wage to start effective January 1st. And I do know that we have a challenge in attracting noon hour aides, for example. I don't know who else would be within that wage range, but I'm wondering if we have calculated how much this will affect us in our budget, and or who it would affect across our board.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I'll initially start the question. It's only just been recently announced. I'll certainly let Superintendent Howitt provide any conversation with respect to how that might affect others in our board. Any implications at all, however, we would consider that as part of our revised estimate submission that would be moving forward in the next month or so.
Supplemental, should we be advocating to the province that obviously that affects our bottom line too? It's a welcome one, I want to say. I support it completely. In fact, I think it's kind of, it should have been in effect years ago, but I wonder if it should be in our advocacy that it actually be funded, since we need to have these members of staff.
Yeah, perhaps maybe I'll let Superintendent Howitt, Houston, speak on the issue first. I'm tired. Sorry for that.
That's okay. Just want to clarify. So the part-time school aides are through pro staff. We do not pay them directly. We have a service contract with pro staff for that. So they would pay their wages. I would assume that when our contract comes up for renewal with them, we would see a change in pricing, but that wouldn't be for this current school year. And we have very little, if any, of our employees would be at minimum wage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment or question there? No? Okay, any further questions during trustee question period from trustees? Okay, seeing none, are there any notices of motion? Okay, any announcements? I actually do not have any, but I will echo the comments of Trustee Olmsted at the Education Committee that this is our last Operations and Finance Committee meeting for 2021. And firstly, thank you to my colleagues for choosing me as chair over the last year. I've learned a lot and it's been a great process. And I want to personally thank Superintendent Armstrong, Mr. Mayhew, and Mrs. Malash for making this process much easier for all of the reports, questions, agenda preparation meetings. I think that we were able to have some great discussions ahead of time at a lot of our meetings to help present the information to all of you and to the public in the most hopefully convenient, transparent way, accessible way is what I was trying to say there. So thank you for all the work behind the scenes to make that happen. And I do not have any further comments or announcements. And so I will adjourn and we can convene into the public board meeting.
Thank you very much, and I would like to pass on my thanks to both the chairs and vice chairs of our committees for a job excellently done under very stressful circumstances this past year, and thanks to trustees for their support for your colleagues. It's always appreciated, and I thank you very much for your hard work. And thank you to staff for your support and your information so that we can do our jobs well. Thank you very much. So we are back on our public board meeting agenda. We are now at agenda item E. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest for this portion of the meeting? Seeing and hearing none. Actions of the board meeting private session. Trustee Cook.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So we have two items. The first one is F1 under business. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Sipcar and somebody second, Trustee Olmsted. Thank you very much. Anyone opposed? And that passes. The next one is F2 and it's under personal. May I have a mover? Trustee Higgison and Trustee Sipcar. All in support, or anyone opposed? And that passes too. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm going to approval of the minutes of our board meeting on October 5th. Is that right? October 5th? My goodness, seems forever ago. Can I get a mover to approve those minutes? Trustee Leclerc, seconded by Trustee Olmsted. Anyone oppose or any discussion on those minutes? Attached there. Seeing and hearing none. Any opposition to the approval of those minutes? Anyone opposed? Seeing and hearing none, that passes. Thank you very much, trustees. Any business arising from those minutes? Do we have any business arising from the minutes of October 5th? We just passed. Seeing and hearing none, screaming right along. Recommendations from the Standing Committee. We do not, to my knowledge, have anything from our Education Committee. However, Operations and Finance Committee, Trustee Sipcar.
We have item J1. Do I need to read it all out?
Yeah, I don't know if we need to read it all out. Just need the mover and the seconder and that whole schmozzle.
If I could move it, Madam Chair, Burgess.
Trustee Sipcar, do you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, I can second.
And all in support? Actually, I should look for opposition. I've been doing that the whole time. Now I'm switching it up on you. And we have one at J2 as well, right? On our Operations and Finance Committee, moved by Trustee Burgess, seconded by. Did we not have a J2?
No, J2 didn't was not supported.
Thank you very much. That's why we have you. Thank you so much. Moving on to notices of motion. Do we have any notices?
Did you call the vote, or did you just ask all those in support?
On the first one, I asked all those in support rather than anyone in opposition.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I switched it up and then confused everyone and then put something on the agenda that wasn't there. I'm getting there. So notices of motion for this evening tonight. Trustee Sipcar, go ahead.
Sure. To further my notice of motion reads as follows. To further demonstrate the board's commitment to environmental stewardship, that the GEC DSB would declare a climate emergency. In doing so, the board acknowledges the impact of greenhouse gases on the climate and commits to adopting a climate action lens to its existing structure, operations, and behavior of its staff, students, and school communities. That the board would be required to commit to an action plan, including priority action items, implementation measures, and cost implications towards the reduction of emissions from its operations. And that was actually directly from the report that was just in the Finance Committee, so I can pass that along, but I just took it pretty much from that verbatim.
Wonderful. So just make sure you pass that along to Madame LeBoeuf, and then we'll have that in there. Any other notices of motion from trustees this evening? To go on our next agenda. Seeing and hearing none, we can adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you all very, very much. See you in a couple weeks.